The second arc of Boruto's time skip, the Shinju Awakening arc, it builds on the drama we got from the Homecoming arc where Boruto returns to Konoha as a rogue ninja, and it gives us a much bleaker look at what a world without Naruto looks like. We learn what happened to Sasuke during his training with Boruto, how Boruto got so incredibly powerful, and we get a massive lore expansion on the Ten Tails, but we also get massive power-ups for a pair of unlikely characters. Since this is going to be part 3 of Boruto's story, I recommend watching the first 2 installments, including a major in-depth breakdown of part 1 that covers themes and fills in gaps from the official source materials that weren't animated or placed in the digital manga chapters, and then watching the Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Homecoming arc since it preludes this one. But fair warning, since Boruto 2 Blue Vortex is an ongoing story, I cannot do a video of the same caliber as the Boruto part 1 video until Boruto part 2 is finished serialization. But for now, enjoy the Shinju Awakening arc of Boruto part 2. With Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter 5, we get our hearts broken. So we open up this chapter with a flashback on the night where Boruto and Sasuke were attacked by Code. Boruto is shown panting in exhaustion from the sword training that Sasuke has put him through, and after gauging the progress that Boruto's made for the day, Sasuke states that they'll rest for the night, and that's where we get a major bombshell. You can tell from Boruto's appearance where his hair is a lot longer and looks very similar to Minato's hair from the Minato one-shot manga chapter. You can tell that Boruto's grown taller and his hair is longer, and that a year has passed since Boruto's left the village. However, Sasuke tells Boruto that in just 1 year of training, Boruto has managed to master every jutsu possible for Sasuke to train him. When Boruto asks to learn more of the Uchiha style jutsu, basically the hidden jutsu of the Uchiha clan, which hidden jutsu are passed down within the members of the main branch, and they don't require a Kekkei Genkai to use, so they can be used by people from outside the clan, like Boruto learning the Uchiha clan's main branch Shuriken Jutsu that Sasuke taught him in the Momoshiki arc, and Boruto perfected when he fought against Shojoji. Sasuke tells Boruto that he's reached his limit in what he can teach him. It's here that we see just how much Sasuke has been placed on a pedestal by Boruto, because he still thinks of him as this almighty hero who doesn't have any limitations, and the idea that there's nothing more that he can learn from him and that Boruto is actually stronger than Sasuke is something that Boruto can't bring himself to believe. Now, this really shouldn't shock you. Boruto right now is still naive despite everything he's gone through. When Damon was doing all that trash talk in Boruto Naruto Next Generation, when they're shopping inside of Konoha, Boruto tells Damon he wouldn't be talking so tough when he was fighting against Naruto and Sasuke, because the child in Boruto still viewed his father and his teacher as these almighty unstoppable heroes. Sasuke tells Boruto here he means everything that he's just told him, stressing that he isn't the type to make jokes. We then shift over to Sasuke revealing that despite his travels with Boruto, where they've grown noticeably closer since leaving the village, there are still things that he's still uncertain about, and it's a gut punch of a reminder that despite how much progress that Boruto's made, Sasuke's memory is still warped by the omnipotence, but he's continuing to trust in Boruto because of how strong of a reaction that Sarada had when she awakened her Mangekyo Sharingan in front of Sasuke, and how strongly she begged him to save Boruto. However, just as we start to see these tender, heartfelt moments between master and student, the two are suddenly on the run because Code has attacked with his Ten Tails army, and Sasuke lets it be known while Boruto might be much stronger than him, they are outnumbered and the enemy is too powerful, Boruto's too inexperienced, and they might not walk out of this alive. It's important to remember that right now this is a blind battle that is heavy with dramatic irony. So that means that we as the audience know that certain claw grimes have Rinnegan eyes, and some of them are stronger than others, and they can all use Code's teleportation space-time jutsu, but Boruto and Sasuke, they don't know any of this information until they begin to trade blows, so it's just new thing after new thing. Basically, the enemy has the element of surprise, and they have a whole bunch of hacks abilities. When you're getting that much back-to-back, it's enough to throw you off your guard, and yet despite this, we still see master and student actually put up a very valiant fight. Sasuke has sustained very heavy damage, and he's managed to slice Code's eye in the process of the fight. Boruto and Sasuke, they are surrounded by claw grimes. With every direction they turn, the claw grimes are on either side of them like wolves in a pack ready to pounce on their target. Sasuke at this point has gotten an accurate assessment of Code's combat ability, being able to confirm he is indeed stronger than Jigen but weaker than Ishiki. Yet despite having an enemy who can absorb absorb ninjutsu, which means that Sasuke's entire ninja arsenal is on the table to be used, something that he didn't have that luxury when fighting Jigen and Ishiki. It's at this point that Sasuke makes a cold calculation. At the rate that the battle is progressing, the two of them will die, and that one of them must walk out of there alive. Sasuke tells Boruto he must run away and live at all costs. Boruto refuses to leave him alone, but Sasuke tells him he's entrusting Sarada to Boruto, and Sasuke then charges off into the battle, running the Chidori through his sword, battling against Code, who is leading that Ten Tails army, and Sasuke's doing it all alone, completely outnumbered and vastly overpowered, but vowing to buy time for Boruto to escape. And it's actually very similar to how Tobirama did a similar thing for Hiruzen. He named him the third Hokage, said take care of the village, take care of your teammates, but get them out of here, all while Tobirama was fighting against 20 S-rank shinobi, granted off screen, and they were led by Ginkaku and Kinkaku, the two pseudo-Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. Sasuke goes down in a very valiant fight, and unlike the Tobirama thing, we actually get to see some of the fight itself. So during this battle, despite Sasuke being alone, he somehow managed to cut down several of the claw grimes, cutting some of them clean in half, and others cutting off multiple limbs. Boruto, hours later, has returned to the scene, and he sees Sasuke holding his sword in his arm despite being turned into a tree, almost as if Sasuke was still trying to fight as he was being turned into the tree. And Boruto walks up to Sasuke and he removes his sword. Now this is really huge because there were still some people doubting if Boruto was even using Sasuke's sword, even though the anime character design sheet years ago told us that he was using Sasuke's sword. That's a primary source material, but people still doubted it. However, we now have confirmation. This is indeed Sasuke's sword. Boruto literally grabs it and places it in his sheath, and he tells Sasuke that he can count on Boruto to carry out his will and fulfill his promise to protect Sarada. Now we then shift over to Konoha, where we see Konohamaru and the members of Team 10. They finally reach Moegi, who has been turned into a tree. She gave her life to save a family during that Ten Tails attack, and this leads to the group vowing to punish those who are responsible for Moegi's fate. And here your heart really has to go out to Konohamaru for a bit. So he's really gone through it, and I'm not talking about him being trash. So in the last 3 years, he's basically been replaced as the sensei to his team Agani. His very first rival, Naruto, is dead according to the intel that he's been given, and now his childhood friend, his teammate, has been turned into a tree, and we as the audience know that she is one of the Shinju who has a Rinnegan. But that's not the most heartbreaking thing here. The Shinju who looks like Moegi reveals that she wants to swallow every inch of Konohamaru whole, and that her name is Matsuri. Her instincts and the instincts of all these Shinju is to consume the people who they had connections with. For her, the person she wants to swallow up is Konohamaru. The one who's named Jura, the one who looks like Jigen, reveals that he wants to consume Naruto, despite Naruto not being an Otsutsuki. The one who looks like Sasuke is called Hidari, which that name in of itself is another classic Masashi Kishimoto troll move, because the name of this version of Sasuke literally translates into right arm, and Sasuke just happens to only have one arm. Guess which arm he doesn't have? Hidari reveals that it's his desire to want to consume Sarada, and this actually makes a ton of sense here. If you go back to Naruto Gaiden, the 7th Hokage and the Scarlet Spring, Masashi Kishimoto wrote Sasuke and Sakura telling Sarada that no matter the distance or the circumstances, their family would always be connected on a deeper level. And Hidari isn't Sarada's biological father, but he is based off of the genetics of her father Sasuke, and based on what we've seen with Kashin Koji and Delta, two people who are genetic clones of Jiraiya and Akibi respectively, they are in possession of the memories and the instincts that belong to their original, even though they're on their own individual being. These Shinju, they're no different, which is really fascinating to see them converse about their true nature in the way that they're doing. Now, taking it a step further, chakra and memories is something we know that are connected. Naruto gave Boruto's chakra for the Rasengan to defeat Momoshiki, which resulted in Boruto getting the memories of Naruto's hardship. Naruto's connected chakra with all the Shinobi Alliance. During the 4th Ninja War, everyone saw his memories and struggles and his hardships. The concept of chakra connecting others and running and working in ways that goes beyond conventional wisdom is still alive and well here. Now, what's really fascinating here is that Ada is watching this entire conversation play out, and for the first time that she's been introduced in this entire series, she genuinely looks scared. She looks afraid because she is the target of the Shinju who looks like Bug, and it leads to Damon freaking out because Ada's freaking out, and Ada drops the drink in her hand in response to this information, and it makes a lot of sense. You can pump all the ninja tech enhancements that you want into Ada. You can give her the strength of Superman and Goku and the powers of the one above all, and it does not matter. She's not skilled at fighting. Power means absolutely nothing if you don't have the skill to use it. Just like having a ton of skill means nothing if you don't have the power to back it up. Unlike her brother who wants to smoke with everyone, when it comes to fighting, Ada don't want no smoke because this girl got asthma. When the smoke detector goes off, she's getting out of there. What's even crazier is that when she's using her Senrigan, the Shinju who looks like Bug is aware of it, and you can tell that this has spooked Ada because this looks like the first time someone's actually watched her while she's watching them. And I love the fact that it's actually a Shinju who looks like Bug who has this connection with Ada, simply for the fact that Bug, when you go back to when Ada was first getting released, he did not want her taken out. He did not like Ada, and he damn sure did not like Damon. And it looks like Damon is going to end up fighting the Shinju who looks like Bug. Very nice to see how more of the seeds that were planted in Boruto Naruto Next Generation are finally starting to blossom here in Boruto 2 Blue Vortex. We then shift over to Sumire speaking to Amato, and Amato reveals that he's always known that something was wrong when it came to Konoha. Basically, out of all the Konoha citizens who are inside of the village and affected by the omnipotence, Amato was the only one who had a working brain. If you'll recall, in chapter 1 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, we learned that at first people sensed that there is a paradox, that something wasn't right, things weren't lining up, but eventually the omnipotence overtook everyone's memories and nobody questioned things anymore. They just accepted that, hey, Kawaki is the biological son of Naruto. It does not matter that there are no photos of Kawaki as a child and all the photos are of Boruto as a child. It does not matter that Kawaki is a cyborg and Naruto's son was never a cyborg. They just randomly accepted it because that's how the omnipotence works. Well, Amato was just like Sasuke. He caught on to things right away, that things were not right, that they were going against his memory, and he realized his memory had been altered and that he could not trust his memory. In his mind, he experimented on Boruto when Boruto was a child. Yet when he looked at Kawaki, he could see clear as day that Kawaki had Amato's ninja tech because his signature was all over the ninja tech. The same thing with Kawaki's karma having the genetic data of Amato's daughter. His memory's telling him this should be Boruto, but his eyes are telling him it's Kawaki, and he knows not to trust his memory. What Amato is saying is no different than what I've said here on the channel numerous times since omnipotence has been explained. Scientists are no different than writers, and Amato was going to be one of the people who figured out the truth. Every scientist has their own signature when it comes to their research, their own methods and their own way of labeling their inventions. They always have something that identifies it as clear as day that it is their work. Amato's no different. With art, if you look at a Van Gogh piece, you know right away, if you know what to look for, you know the difference between a fake Van Gogh and a real Van Gogh piece of work. When you look at comics, you can tell when a story is written by Jonathan Hickman versus a story that has been written by Steve Ditko when it comes to Marvel Comics. The Naruto franchise is no different at all. Whether it be Kishimoto or Ikimoto, it's the same thing. You still see elements of Japanese folklore and Shintoism being used. You see puns being used in character names and powers and abilities, like say Ada and Damon, perfect example of them, with Ada and Damon being the representation of Amaterasu and Susanoo respectively, and both of them having tech puns for names and their powers working like tech puns. So Amato figuring out that his memory's been swapped is par for the course. The only person alive who could have ever put that ninja tech and Akibi's DNA into Kawaki's karma seal is Amato. And while this is going on, Sai is watching the entire conversation with Sumire and Amato, and he looks absolutely pissed at what it is he's heard. And he isn't the only one, because the 8th Hokage Shikamaru has now been made aware that after all of these years, Amato is still withholding information, even after Naruto and Shikamaru told him, stop holding back information. Even after Shikamaru confronted him saying, it feels like everything's been going exactly as you planned it. Shikamaru knows that if Amato is speaking this openly now, it's because Amato already has another backup plan or something else set in motion that he wants to work towards, which means that Shikamaru has threats inside of Konoha in the form of Amato and threats outside of Konoha in the form of code that he has to deal with. And this is where we shift to our final and our most important scene. Sumire tells Sarada the truth about Amato, and Sarada is initially skeptical about it, but Sarada remembers how her own father reacted to what she said when she awakened her Mangekyo Sharingan in Boruto Naruto Next Generations chapter 80, and she was telling him that he must save Boruto, that everyone's wrong, don't let them kill Boruto. Sasuke is Sarada's proof that there are those who, when they're affected by the omnipotence, they can still see past it when they know that something's wrong, and she's no longer fully questioning if Amato was telling Sumire the truth or not, because she has data based off of her own experiences. Unbeknownst to them, Boruto has now teleported back into Konoha. Some kind of way he's either already left a marker at their location, because Boruto states that Sasuke was able to trust him because even though he doubted his own memories and knew that his memories are altered, Sarada's passion and insistence that he trusts in Boruto made Sasuke do it, and Boruto says that because of Sarada's actions, Sasuke was able to ultimately save him. This leads to Sarada running to jump into Boruto's arm, crying as she's hugging him, and Sarada has a pretty funny line I'll be interested to see if Viz Media keeps, but she calls him idiot Boruto and says that he's late, and Boruto hugs Sarada back, saying that he's here now and that's all that matters. And as this is going on, Sumire is watching with a helpless look on her face, but what is so poetic here is the fact that the last two remnants of Sasuke's legacy, his daughter and his student, have now been reunited. It's heartbreaking for fans of Sasuke Uchiha who have watched him through the 36 years of his life. However, when you consider everything that Sasuke's been through, having Boruto and Sarada continue his legacy after he's given himself for the sake of the new generation while he's still alive, he is incapacitated, is a poetic way to end Sasuke's story for now. Now with chapter 6, things get even more crazier because essentially Shikamaru has begun putting the pieces together and realizing something isn't right. Boruto is a rogue ninja, but before Shikamaru can fully begin to interrogate Boruto to learn more about the truth, we have the battle of Boruto versus Mitsuki that takes place, and this is a battle that is one of many for Boruto that showcases his path to redemption is not going to be easy. So we open up this part of the story with Shikamaru meeting with the elders of Konoha, who for reference right now at this point in the story are 91 years old, and they let it be known right away that Boruto coming back to Konoha changes nothing, even if he was the one who saved the village from Kode's attack, because he still is a wanted man for killing the 7th Hokage and attempting to murder the son of the 7th Hokage, Kawaki Uzumaki. They lay it on pretty thick when they start grilling Shikamaru, telling him that they can't sit by and do nothing because this is something that is bigger than the Hidden Leaf Village. This is the entire will of the whole Land of Fire, with the feudal lord being extremely pissed off over what's happened, and it makes a lot of sense. With the world thinking that Naruto is dead, this is more than just the death of a run-of-the-mill Hokage. Naruto represents something much larger than that. He represents hope itself. He saved the world from Kaguya, Tenari, Momoshiki, and Ishiki. During the darkness of the 4th Ninja War, his bright gold KCM cloak was the light that pushed away the darkness of so many shinobi. He was the glue that kept the 5 nations together during the 16 years of unprecedented peace on this continent. The Land of Fire's feudal lord, Madoka Ikkyo, as we saw in the Boruto Mujina Bandits arc, he considers Naruto a close personal friend. Not bringing his killer to justice, it isn't an option, and when Shikamaru tries to back out of the conversation, he's hit with another dose of reality, which is that the 3 years he requested before officially becoming Hokage, those 3 years are now up. One thing that's been glaring obvious is that Shikamaru's face hasn't been covered on the Hokage monument now, and he hasn't officially taken the title Hokage yet, despite wielding the authority of Hokage, basically doing what Kakashi did in Kakashi Hiden, Lightning in the Frozen Sky, where Kakashi made decisions as Hokage, but he hadn't officially taken the title from Tsunade by having his ceremony, much like we saw Tsunade do in Naruto Part 1. The elders, they tell Shikamaru that the other villages, they are paying attention to this lack of decision by Shikamaru as well, and Shikamaru kicks it down down the road, saying that he'll report back to them later, and that's in character for him. It's actually very in character. Shikamaru was someone who multiple people said in Naruto's manga had the potential to be Hokage, from Tamari to Asuma, but Asuma in particular said that Shikamaru would never seek out the position due to how much work it required. We're seeing some of that hesitancy now with Shikamaru, albeit it's for different reasons than what Asuma predicted. And when Shikamaru is smoking to calm his nerves, we see Ino show up at the Hokage office with the old ninja mission records, and we get our first sign that Shikamaru has been thinking over Amato's words in the last chapter very carefully, and it's beginning to bother him. Amato realized that all their memories were altered, and he kept it quiet. Now Shikamaru is finally looking at the mission records and applying that same logic that Amato used, which is that regardless as to what his memories are telling him, the evidence in front of him is telling him otherwise. And Shikamaru says it himself, he had never considered the possibility that his memories might have been altered. We learned in the last chapter that passing out photos of baby Boruto with Naruto didn't work. Sarada tells us as much, but those mission records, that's a different matter. They're kept under lock and key in the Hokage Tower. That's highly sensitive information that not just anybody will be able to actually get their hands on and alter. So you can see the logic behind what Shikamaru is trying to do to verify information. Just as Amato recognized his signature on Kawaki's ninja tech, Shikamaru going through those mission records is looking for evidence to see if Sarada was telling the truth about Boruto and Kawaki. When Ino calls him out on breaking protocol, Shikamaru tells her that this is information that they're about to discuss that needs to only be between himself and Ino. The sensory team, they can't know about their conversation. Neither can Ada, Kawaki, or Amato, with Shikamaru telling Ino that she's the only person he can depend on now, and that obviously leads to Ino agreeing to help. It's then that we shift to Kawaki being brought up to speed by Ada about the Shinju, and we see a big red flag that is easy to go unnoticed if you aren't paying very close attention. Kawaki gets told the Shinju are targeting Boruto and Kawaki, which is nothing to be surprised about. They're Otsuki. They're gonna seek them out to devour them, but when Ada says that Naruto's in danger, that's the only thing that Kawaki hears, and he shows no regard for Ada saying that she's a target as well. She's an afterthought to Kawaki, and this is big for two big reasons. One, it shows that despite everything that Ada has done for Kawaki to try to win his love and affection, Kawaki still views her as a tool. She's a human GPS monitor or a surveillance camera and nothing else. She's a very distant second when it comes to his priorities. The only thing that he cares about is Naruto. At this point, Ada is basically a sneaky link, and as far as Kawaki's concerned, Naruto is his one and only, which is something that no sneaky link could ever hope to be. And the hurt expression on Ada's face, it really stands out, as does Damon giving Kawaki a cold stare in the process, which is important because Damon's priority is his sister before anything else. And back when the Omnipotence was casted and Damon thought that Kawaki was doing something to Ada, he directly says that he'll make him pay, and Kawaki vows to kill Damon if they ever cross blows again. And being the little troll that he is, Damon blows up the whole situation, purposely trying to push Kawaki's buttons. He tells Kawaki what happens when the Shinju, they just come to Konoha randomly and they start looking for Naruto and asking questions about a dead man. People are gonna start figuring out that you're lying, and when that happens, what are you gonna do? Damon says, hey, I don't particularly care, and you can tell from the moment that he says that Kawaki's not pleased, and he's pointing out to Kawaki and his obsession with Naruto and his obsession to killing Boruto. He's left himself open for getting exposed, and Damon pretty much finds it hilarious about what will happen to Kawaki when the truth comes out. And Ada, seeing that Damon is beginning to piss Kawaki off, immediately tries to step in, but the damage is done. There's no salvaging it. Kawaki now leaves the room, but much to his dismay, Mitsuki is on the other side of the room, and he may or may not have actually been listening in this entire time, which leads to Kawaki comparing Mitsuki to goldfish poop that's floating in a fish tank, which is basically him calling Mitsuki a follower. Be very curious to see how Viz Media actually translates that. Meanwhile, on the other side of Konoha, Sarada begins to start blushing at the way that she behaved when she first saw Boruto running into his arms and hugging him, and Sumire, seeing the quiet tension between these two where neither one of them are speaking, they're just sitting there awkwardly without saying any words. She tries to break the ice by starting a conversation with Boruto, which is enough to get Boruto to say, hey, I'm so glad that you two are fine, but for the time being, I need to keep this really short because the sensory team, while they can't sense my chakra, eventually Kawaki's gonna know where I am. He's gonna come after me, and that's what leads to Boruto quickly bringing the two of them up to speed very quickly about everything that happened during the time skip from the moment that he left Konoha all up into the moment that he just showed back up in Konoha, explaining to them how Sasuke sacrificed himself to save Boruto from their battle against Code, how Sasuke had turned into a tree, to the development of the Claw Grimes evolving as Shinju with their own will, and Boruto shares his theory, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. He says that in the past, they were supposed to eat whatever being had chakra. That's what the Shinju is supposed to do. And primarily, for the longest of times, it was just Otsutsuki because humans didn't have chakra until Hagoromo spread it out. But now, due to Code's Karma Seal, something has changed, and Boruto states that while Karma Seal that Code has, it doesn't have Ishiki's genetics being extracted into him the same way that Momoshiki's was being pumped into Boruto's body and Ishiki's was being pumped into Kawaki's body. At the end of the day, Code has a Karma Seal, and that power that came from the Otsutsuki is inside that Karma Seal, and Boruto theorizes that because Code had Karma and used power of Otsutsuki, it altered those Shinju into what they are now. Meanwhile, after Mitsuki sneak attacks Kawaki, leaving him unconscious, which somewhere Kawaki fans are screaming in rage over the fact that Mitsuki was able to one-shot Kawaki, albeit it's an off-guard feat. I wouldn't put too much stock into it. He quickly calls for Shikamaru, asking him to have Ada verify Boruto's location for him, saying that he thinks Boruto's in the southwest just based off of Kawaki's prior actions, and he says that he is the best choice to be sent to deal with Boruto, telling Shikamaru that if Kawaki were to go confront Boruto, Boruto would just sense him coming and run away. But Mitsuki, on the other hand, he can suppress his chakra and that he can get the drop on Boruto, which logically speaking, it makes a lot of sense. But now that we know that Shikamaru realizes his memory's been altered, he's in a real bind, and he has to trust that Mitsuki can't actually take down Boruto because Shikamaru needs Boruto to stay alive long enough for him to verify the truth. So in order to hedge his bets, while Mitsuki is racing towards Boruto, Shikamaru has Ino connect him directly to Boruto via the Yamanaka clan's hidden jutsu, and he tells him to not make any signs that they're being connected, which speaks volumes to how cautious Shikamaru is being right now because he won't even let Sarada and Sumire know the truth, despite the fact that he had previously been working with them on a plan to take down Ada. And Boruto calls Shikamaru out on breaking standard operating procedures, saying that, hey, you're a Hokage right now, so how can I trust you? I am a wanted criminal in Konoha. How do I know you're not setting me up? And just when Shikamaru gives Boruto some goodwill face, saying, hey, someone's coming after you, Mitsuki's snakes, they wrap around Boruto, and we see some of the fruits of Boruto's training with Sasuke begin to kick in. In the last chapter, we got told by Sasuke that Boruto had mastered every jutsu and fighting style that Sasuke could teach him, and it's here in this Mitsuki versus Boruto scuffle that we see some of the similarities in their fighting styles. Boruto, for instance, throws his sword into the air and teleports to the flying Raijin marker on his sword, similar to how Sasuke would use a main Tejikara. Classic example being how Sasuke, when trapped in Momoshiki's chakra chains, was able to teleport himself out of the way in episode 65 of Boruto Naruto Next Generation. So when Boruto lands on the ground and he faces Sage Mode Mitsuki, Boruto knows right away that he's going to be in for a rough fight as Mitsuki starts to fight from a distance by shooting off those chakra snakes at Boruto, despite Sarada screaming for him to stop. However, Boruto, being the quick analytical thinker that he is, he runs purple lightning through his sword to cut them down and flies into the air to dodge Mitsuki's striking Shadow Snake Jutsu. After Boruto surveys the area to make sure that Mitsuki came alone, he tells Sarada he's going to find a way to turn everyone back to normal, and he flies away from Konoha, but not before promising to return back to the village at a later point in time. And in case you're wondering how Boruto learned the purple lightning, I discussed that in my Purple Lightning Explained video, and I specifically said that Kakashi taught Boruto the jutsu. That's something we find out in the Boruto character files, that Boruto had learned the jutsu itself. While Boruto uses his Otsutsuki powers to fly away, doing the very thing that Amato told us in Boruto Naruto Next Generations when he and Ada came to Konoha, and Amato told Shikamaru that Boruto and Kawaki would soon be flying and using Otsutsuki powers. While Boruto zips through the air, Shikamaru tells Boruto about the kill order on Boruto and that he can't publicly support Boruto, so they'll have to communicate using Ino from now on. And Shikamaru for the first time asks Boruto if he's actually Naruto's real son, directly asking him, are you Uzumaki Boruto? And you can tell from Boruto's expression that's a bit jarring. And this is probably the first time in the last 3 years that Boruto's ever heard someone refer to him as Uzumaki Boruto. And Shikamaru reveals that after he heard Amato's conversation in the last chapter, when he thought everything over, all the irregularities that he saw now made perfect sense to him. The things that Sarada told us in chapter 1, like people saying, why is Naruto's son a cyborg? Why doesn't Naruto's son have Momoshiki's chakra inside of him? Everything makes sense to him now, and he needs Boruto to verify clarify if Boruto and Kawaki's lives have been switched around in terms of everyone's memories. And this also by extension explains why Shikamaru didn't want Ada to know, because he's likely already suspected she had something to do with this, and she's been lying to him out of her loyalty to Kawaki. Shikamaru is putting the pieces together now, and we're seeing exactly what Ada told Sarada and Sumire in chapter 1 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, which is that it's easier for people to come to their own conclusions than to try and change their minds, because if you try to do that, they'll just look at you crazy, whereas they figure it out for themselves, they'll be more likely to accept the truth. However, before Boruto can answer Shikamaru, he notices Mitsuki at some point during the skirmish was able to plant one of those snakes onto him, and he looks up to see Sage Mode Mitsuki running towards him with killing intent, which is a rather impressive speed feat for Mitsuki to move on the ground fast enough to catch up to Boruto, despite Boruto literally flying away from the village at high speeds. It's at this point that Boruto stares down Mitsuki, stating that he'll have to be rough with Mitsuki, and we end the chapter off with a major cliffhanger. And it really is kind of heartbreaking when you realize that just when it looks like Boruto was getting an ally, he has to now turn his attention to fighting someone who used to be one of his closest allies. Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 7 just showed us with Chapter 7 that there are levels to this, and whatever level a character thinks they're at, Boruto's just levels ahead of them, playing on God mode, which is exactly what Mitsuki found out in this chapter when he fought Boruto, because Boruto basically pulled a Sukuna to Mitsuki's Jogo and told that boy to stand proud. Jokes aside though, Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 7 has shifted the story yet again and dropped a few truth bombs that are going to shake things up and leave long-lasting effects. We open up the chapter where the last one left off. Mitsuki is rushing towards Boruto for the fight, but as he's doing so, we're given a glimpse into Mitsuki's psyche, and it gives us some much needed development for Mitsuki's character by building on what was already pre-established with the character itself. Mitsuki says that he is the moon that exists in the darkness, and like the moon in real life, the moon doesn't give off its own light, but instead it must shine based off of the reflected light from the sun. Ever since Kishimoto drew the Mitsuki one-shot manga back in 2016, Mitsuki has been in search of the sun to his moon as he goes through the various stages of discovering his own humanity as the clone son of Orochimaru, with Mitsuki being guided to that sun by the files that Orochimaru allowed him to take, which had Boruto's photo on them. Mitsuki is shown deep in thought, staring at the back of Kawaki, and it's poetic that he's staring at Kawaki from behind, in the shadow of the person who Mitsuki believes is supposed to shine light on him, and that's the reason it's poetic due to how it's paneled, because we go from Mitsuki looking at Kawaki's back, from his shadow, to Mitsuki rushing forward towards Boruto, the person who is really his son and is trying to shine light into the darkness that Kawaki has casted over the world by using omnipotence and framing Boruto for the murder of Naruto. What we're seeing here is both symbolic in terms of representation of Mitsuki's dynamic with Boruto and Kawaki, but we're also seeing the seeds being planted of Mitsuki coming to the realization that perhaps he's wrong in his heart, but he isn't able to see through the funk of omnipotence just yet. And as we'll learn later on, he's never gonna fully see past it as long as omnipotence is in effect. However, as Mitsuki rushes Boruto, we see Boruto's already begun thinking how he wants to handle the battle, and despite his words at the end of the last chapter where he talked of getting rough with Mitsuki, Boruto is giving Mitsuki the opportunity to see reason before he uses force. Boruto throws two shuriken in the direction of Mitsuki, and after they lodge themselves into the tree, Boruto diverts Mitsuki's attention away from the shuriken by not using them right away, but instead Boruto begins dodging Mitsuki's chakra snakes, and at one point he's almost wrapped up in one of them, and Boruto manages to slip away at the last second by using his god-given natural speed. Just when it looks like one of Mitsuki's chakra snakes are about to hit him, Boruto makes the hand seal for the flying Raijin, and he teleports away to one of the shuriken he threw, and due to how he's maneuvering Mitsuki the entire time, Boruto's now positioned himself directly behind Mitsuki, but instead of taking the time to end the fight with one blow, Boruto declines and chooses to gather more intel, which is another sign of the maturation and growth of Boruto's character. He's no longer just reacting and charging head on in the fight and winging the plan using his natural genius. He's staying more composed and he's thinking a few steps ahead. With shuriken in the tree, we can see the natural gleam on the shuriken that you normally see, where there's a contrast in the specs with the soft shading with the dark shading to give it that glossy, shiny appearance. Based on what Boruto's done so far, it appears as if he's already mastered key elements of the Flying Raijin, despite him humbly saying he's not as good at it as his grandfather. The jutsu can be performed one of two ways, either by the first method of the user touching a person to teleport, or they place a seal on them or an object, or you have the second method, which is the user's chakra being connected to the object or person they want to teleport to. The smart money is on Boruto marking his weapons, because the second method is more advanced use of the jutsu, but the big thing here is that Boruto came back to Konoha with multiple ways to use the jutsu, and he's showing Mitsuki that had he wanted to, he could have ended the fight right there, but he has no aggression in his heart towards Mitsuki, which is going to be important. It's Boruto's way of trying to show him, if I am the monster that you think I am, then why did I save the village from Code? And why didn't I just take you down right there when I had the chance to do so? Why am I asking you questions about Kawaki instead of just fighting you? Am I really the monster, or maybe do you have the wrong idea about me? However, while Mitsuki doubles down on his intention to fight Boruto, Shikamaru brings Boruto and us as the audience up to speed about what really happened, and it's a lot more lore that we can file away on the Otsutsuki clan. Mitsuki specifically poisoned Kawaki so as to prevent him from entering into his Otsutsuki transformation, and Mitsuki is attempting to do the same thing to Boruto. Now, I can already see a few people looking at this and saying this is a plot hole, this makes no sense, but it really isn't. There was never anything that told us that this wouldn't affect Otsutsuki, and in Boruto Naruto Next Generation's anime, in the arc that Kishimoto wrote the story points for, the time slip arc, we saw that poison was a thing that works on Otsutsuki and affects their bodies. I personally don't take this as being a bad set of writing. If poison can affect Otsutsuki, then it makes sense that their vessels should be affected as well. It's a bit convenient that it prevents them from transforming, but it's also convenient that the Karma Seal has multiple stages to it in terms of the power it can draw out, which we learned when Boruto fought Code in part 1. And Code said, hey, you're not using Karma correctly, and then all of a sudden we get True Essence Boruto shortly after. What we're seeing here is that Mitsuki clearly didn't rush into combat without a plan in place, and if anything, he's been plotting on how to fight Boruto for the last 3 years, and this method makes sense because it's a ninja method. It is using deception. In Mitsuki's mind, Boruto is somebody that would not see through deception because his memories of Boruto and Kawaki are switched, and as we saw, Kawaki has no regard for the way of the shinobi. Had Mitsuki's snakes bitten into Boruto, and if Boruto ever tried to use Karma, which in Mitsuki's mind he would be relying on, he wouldn't be able to do so. Chalk up points on the table for Orochimaru's clone, keeping the ninja elements alive in the series. Mitsuki knows deep down in his heart the truth. There is a gap between himself and Boruto. The gap is as large as the distance between the goalposts on an American football field. It's attainable to reach, but it's going to take a lot of work to get there. Mitsuki knows he is fighting someone who's strong enough to take down Code with ease, and he knows that it's something that not even Kawaki can do. Now, this might rub Kawaki fans the wrong way, but it actually makes a lot of sense. We've been saying since the start of Boruto TBV Vortex that Kawaki appears to have suffered the same fate that Naruto did between the end of Naruto chapter 699 and Naruto chapter 710, which that's the Shin Uchiha arc. He grew stronger, but his combat senses got rusty, and getting rusty held him back. Kawaki said himself that when he saw Code was damaged by Boruto, he said he could probably kill him. He wasn't 100% certain, but it was more probable than not. But given that he was getting tagged by the Claw Grimes, granted one of them had the Rinnegan, but we saw that he was forced to use the Karma Seal and Ninja Tech inside of his body to fire out Chakra Blast and use Ninja Tech to take down some of the Claw Grimes. We saw that his guard was lowered enough that Mitsuki was able to knock him unconscious. If we go back 3 years ago in the timeline, Mitsuki never would have gotten that close because Kawaki's senses were a lot sharper. By comparison, even when Boruto fought against the evolved Shinju, he never resorted to using Karma. The story has been building up to Mitsuki's belief that Boruto might be stronger, and thus it makes Boruto a true threat to Kawaki, which simultaneously makes this battle of Mitsuki versus Boruto have the stakes raised because Mitsuki is fighting to protect his false son in a battle with his true son, all while the light shining from Boruto is slowly shining through the dark fog that has clouded Mitsuki's eyes. It's then that we see a rather creative attack pattern by Mitsuki where Mitsuki shoots out 6 snakes at Boruto, but in typical ninja trickery, the snakes transform into shadow clones, and each of these clones start shooting off chakra snakes at Boruto. But Boruto, being the genius that he is, he quickly adjusts to the sight of the shadow clones by putting distance between himself and Mitsuki, and as the battle with the Mitsuki clones begins to damage the environment, Boruto has a very chilling line that should grab your attention as a reader, and I want to bring your attention to that. As he's avoiding Mitsuki's attacks, he tells Mitsuki, in response to him saying that Boruto should just disappear from this world, Boruto says he can't die yet, and he can't afford to lose in Konoha right now. It's a similar stance to what he took with Kawaki, when Kawaki said he would kill Boruto inside of Konoha, and Boruto said dying in Konoha is ideal, but that time isn't now. Seeds are being planted here for something darker with Boruto's fate, or it could be a red herring, and I'll say this, the narrative is doing a good job of not telegraphing which it's going to be by burying it inside the action, where we see Boruto grabbing his sword and quickly run lightning release through it as he takes down the Mitsuki clones, but Mitsuki then takes the opportunity of all the smoke that has been created from the destruction of the clones to begin weaving hand seals to lightning release jutsu, but unfortunately for Mitsuki, Boruto is beginning the same process, and he counters Mitsuki's snake lightning jutsu with his own thunderclap arrow, and the two jutsu cancel each other out, and that's really poetic. Boruto hasn't seen Mitsuki in 3 years, but years of going to the academy with him and fighting in battles alongside Mitsuki as a Genin, it's allowed him to know the jutsu that Mitsuki will use before Mitsuki can even do so. Another seed planted in Mitsuki's mind that Boruto knows Mitsuki in ways that a stranger should not, all while confirming for us that Boruto doesn't have the malicious intent, because had he had true malicious intent, a genius like Boruto could have easily countered with a wind release jutsu, which is naturally strong against lightning release, but he didn't. Boruto is making it as plain as day. He's fully annoyed with fighting Mitsuki, but he isn't trying to end the fight using aggression, but instead he's trying to reach him through compassion and mercy, which ends up being what happens here. Boruto takes advantage of the smoke created in the explosion to draw his sword and place the blade at Mitsuki's throat, making it clear if he wanted to, he could have cut his head off, and Mitsuki then surrenders, telling Boruto to go ahead and kill him, stop wasting time. But Boruto doesn't do so because he's making it clear his intention wasn't to kill Mitsuki. Boruto takes the time to speak to Mitsuki, basically telling him to search his heart, because the battle should have shown him the truth, that through exchanging fists, it should have shown him that Boruto doesn't want to kill him and that Mitsuki is wrong about this whole situation. And Ino and Shikamaru right now, right away, they know that this is Boruto attempting to connect with Mitsuki through the concept introduced in Naruto's manga way back in part 1, that a fight between two high-level shinobi, it can result in communication through fists and not having words exchanged. Yet as Ino says, it's a dangerous method to take that approach, but Boruto holds steady, telling Mitsuki that he can shine on his own, and that if he really needs a son, that son isn't Kawaki, that son is Boruto. Seeing Boruto sheath his sword and refuse to engage further with Mitsuki in combat, it throws Mitsuki for a loop, as does Boruto, telling him that he's now Mitsuki's son, and when Mitsuki snakes wrap around Boruto, he's further baffled by Boruto no longer attempting to escape, but instead Boruto holds firm, telling Mitsuki that he knows in his own heart that Kawaki isn't his son, and we see that Mitsuki is beginning to see more seeds of doubt that are blossoming, and it goes back to what we saw in chapter 1, where Mitsuki is openly questioning if the cold-natured Kawaki was still the son to Mitsuki's moon. Boruto is behaving more like a light of a sun lighting the path forward for Mitsuki than Kawaki likely did during those 3 years, and you can see the wheels turning in Mitsuki's head and the doubt creeping in, and Boruto basically gives him the Talk no Jutsu treatment, telling him search your own heart, come to your own conclusions, which shows that Boruto understands the same thing that Ada told to Sumire and to Sarada in chapter 1. People affected by the omnipotence have to come to their own conclusions about the truth, because you're never going to rewrite their memories. That's not going to happen, and you're not going to change their perception of what they perceive to be the truth on their own. It's something they have to reach through on their own, and it gets worse based on what Boruto's saying here. After he tells Mitsuki that despite Kawaki waiting to kill him, Boruto has no intention of killing Kawaki, and he states that despite what Mitsuki's been told, Naruto's still alive and so is Boruto's mother Hinata. Boruto leaves Mitsuki with a nugget of information, saying that he needs to ask himself if he truly needs a son to shine, or can he do it on his own, and if he does need one, Boruto will be there to help him. With that, Boruto leaves to speak with Ino and Shikamaru away from Mitsuki's prying eyes, so as to prevent Mitsuki from figuring out the truth about Boruto's alliance, and staying in line with something that we saw in earlier chapters, where when Kawaki was in the Hokage office, the first thing he started asking was, did somebody from the surveillance team contact Boruto? So Kawaki's already suspicious there. Just another seed that has been planted that we don't know if it's gonna bear fruit later on. Meanwhile, as Kawaki wakes up super pissed off, demanding to know where Mitsuki is, Boruto spills the beans to what happened when he speaks to Shikamaru. He basically says Ada unwittingly casted omnipotence to alter everyone's memories according to Kawaki's wishes, and he tells Shikamaru that it doesn't matter that he knows the truth now. Omnipotence will eventually suppress his mind to the truth, and this isn't the first time Shikamaru's been made aware of the truth, which we as the readers, we know that that is a sad reality. Sarada told us 2 chapters ago that they literally passed out photos of baby Boruto being held by Naruto, and people were still affected by omnipotence going, yeah, that's weird, but Kawaki is still Naruto's son. I don't know what this is, but that ain't Naruto's kid right there. In chapter 1, even though people saw that Kawaki was a car cyborg with a model's nanotech inside of him, and he had Ishiki's coma seal, something that never should have happened to Naruto's son, they said, well, that's weird, but Kawaki's Naruto's son. Omnipotence will always suppress the doubts that they have about reality unless they are actively behaving with that knowledge, knowing that this is a false reality. As we see with Amato and as we saw with Sasuke, Boruto tells Shikamaru that even knowing the truth, he's in danger of omnipotence, forcing him to accept the memories that are telling him Boruto is an outsider. Kawaki is Naruto's child. However, what isn't a byproduct of the omnipotence is the belief that Boruto killed Naruto and Hinata. That had nothing to do with omnipotence, and Boruto makes that clear. Kawaki distorted the truth, and Boruto tells Shikamaru that he needs to trust in Boruto on that one aspect because things cannot be turned back to normal. Shikamaru and everyone else's memories, they're going to stay altered. But at least now Shikamaru knows the truth about Naruto and Hinata, something omnipotence has no bearing on. But Boruto states it's irrelevant because even if they found a way to reverse everything, his beef with Kawaki still remains. It's here that we see Boruto's truly Naruto's son. He explains to Shikamaru he understands why Kawaki did what he did by sealing away Naruto, and that Kawaki believed he was doing the right thing. But Shikamaru says like, hey fam, if that would have been me, I'd have saved Naruto and then I'd have killed Kawaki, which is something that is a human reaction most of us would have. Like, I would not forgive Kawaki. It'd be on sight if I seen this dude. But Boruto is taking the path that his father did with Sasuke and Obito and Nagato. He's seeking to understand and isn't blindly throwing hands. Upon hearing this, Shikamaru does something that will give Naruto fans everywhere a bit of deja vu. Shikamaru basically plays the heroes into Boruto's Itachi. He says that in order to prevent chaos with the public by them finding out the truth, Boruto will have to play the villain role. Boruto will be hunted down under the pretense of something that he is innocent of having done, all while the public is ignorant of the truth, and him protecting the village from the shadows, just as Itachi protected the village from afar, all while being hunted down. Boruto, he accepts that fate, knowing that he's now the Shadow Hokage for the village, a role that he's always wanted, but under different circumstances. It's then that we shift over to another bone-chilling reveal. Jura hasn't just been sitting around doing nothing. He's actually been reading the history of the Naruto world. And this is where we start getting our first signs that these Shinju, they are evolving. They are no longer mindless tin-tails driven by pure instinct. And Jura has now set his sights. The person who he wants to consume is Naruto Uzumaki, and for him, he needs to learn more about the ninja world, which now starts the escalation of the Shinju Awakening arc, because from here, things will never be the same. So the thing with Boruto TBV Vortex Chapter 8 is that there are a lot of moving pieces on the chessboard, and to say things got out of hand is an understatement. We have Jura and Hidari inside the village, we got Himawari stocks going up and Kawaki stocks going down. And as you expect, there are ramifications for each of these. We open up the chapter with Ada replaying the events of the last chapter, but because this is Ada, someone who despises fighting and views it as being barbaric, she basically skipped over the entirety of Boruto versus Mitsuki and is instead focusing on Boruto telling Mitsuki that he is his son and he will always be there for Mitsuki regardless of the circumstances. And based on Ada's reaction, Boruto might have added someone else to his harem, but we'll touch on that later. Right away, this this is our sign that Ada has been ordered by Kawaki to use her Semigon to track Mitsuki's location so they can find Boruto, but instead of looking to see where he is in the present tense, she's watching what happened when Mitsuki found Boruto. It's a subtle action, but it's enough to show that there's a small crack that's being set in the Kawaki and Ada dynamic, and the chapter then makes it clear even more when you see what happens next. That entire Boruto Mitsuki conversation, it grabbed Ada's attention, but before she can go through her thoughts and feelings any further, Kawaki starts talking aggressively to Ada, saying that he doesn't have time for her to be taking her time because he's worried Boruto will escape. We're seeing subtle signs of it here, but we're seeing Kawaki's aggression towards someone who clearly loves him show itself, and it goes to what we've been saying for his character arc. In part 1 of the story, he was the boy who had nothing and he stole everything he wanted, and in part 2, he's the boy who has everything he's ever wanted, but he is slowly losing most of it, if not all of it, because he doesn't know how to reciprocate love, because damaged people have a hard time loving others. He's walking that line of being verbally abusive here with Ada, and she's begging Kawaki to give her more time, but the other people watching the scene, they've taken notice in the gradual escalation with Kawaki and Ada's dynamic. First, you have Delta warning Kawaki to watch how he's speaking to Ada, and while Kawaki's telling Delta to mind her own business, we see Damon once again giving Kawaki that death glare, and it continues with what we've seen with these two as far back as part 1 of Boruto, where Damon warned Kawaki, do not disrespect or harm his sister. Here we see Damon making a glance at Kawaki that is basically a silent mental note of Damon saying strike 2, one more strike and you're out, because he doesn't seem too pleased with how Kawaki is talking to his sister, and it's something to keep your eye on moving forward with the story, because Damon versus Kawaki's been teased for a while now. It's at this point that Kawaki flies off with Delta at his side after Ada gives Kawaki Boruto's location, and there's a couple of things to take in note of this entire interaction. The first is that after Delta promises to tell Kawaki off for how he's been treating Ada, Ada continues to show seemingly unwaveringly love towards Kawaki by asking Delta to look after Kawaki for her, but when she's alone with just herself and Damon, the look on Ada's face gives a hint towards her being fully aware of how Kawaki hasn't truly reciprocated her love and affection, and he views her more as a tool, as a surveillance camera, more than anything else. Ada is standing by her man Kawaki, she's doing that for right now, but those feelings were clearly hurt, and if there's a split in the future, it won't be without Kawaki at least having gotten some warning to ease up on Ada, because as they're flying to Boruto's location, Ada warns Kawaki that the moment that Ada is tired of Kawaki, Delta is gonna kill him for the way that he's been treating her, but Kawaki shrugs it off, telling her the same thing that he told Sarada a few chapters ago in the Hokage office. Once he's completed his goal, basically kill Boruto, destroy the Ten Tails, and kill Code, he'll gladly go off into the shadows and won't bother anyone. Meanwhile, as the remaining Claw Grime is running through the forest undetected, Boruto and Shikamaru, they continue their conversation from before, with Boruto telling Shikamaru that while the planet is currently in danger because of the Shinju, they won't have anything truly terrifying to worry about until either Boruto or Kawaki is eaten by one of the Shinju, because if that happens, the Shinju will become perfected and it will produce a chakra fruit that comes at the expense of life of the planet. What we're seeing here is further clarification for anyone who might have been wondering if the Shinju evolving meant the end of the result being Boruto and Kawaki getting consumed. Maybe that got changed, and the story's telling us no, nothing has changed. If people want the planet to survive, neither Boruto or Kawaki can be captured or consumed, because it will be game over if that's the case. Basically, these Shinju, they're going off on side quests, but the main mission to consume Boruto and Kawaki is still in effect. Shikamaru then takes time to press Boruto even further for information, which is very much in character for Shikamaru. He's getting as much information on the front end as he can so that he can begin coming up with counter strategies once he's had time to sit down and sort through all the details and come up with contingencies, and that's exactly why he begins to ask Boruto specifically about those people trapped in the trees or bitten by the Ten Tails. That's another sign that what Sarada told Shikamaru to do back in chapter 5 of Two Blue Vortex, he's taken under consideration, which is to work alongside Boruto Boruto to find a way to reverse the fates of those who are in the tree. It's something that he's following through with now, and we see the current 8th Hokage learning from the mistakes of the past as a result of this conversation with Boruto, which bodes well for future conversations he'll have with Sarada later on down the line. Boruto confirms with Shikamaru something that we as the audience, we've all suspected this, but now we have official confirmation, which is that the people in the tree, they're all alive, but it's because the 10 tails that bit them is using their chakra specifically. We knew they're alive, but we didn't know officially if they were using their chakra. That's why they're being kept alive. Boruto doesn't know to what end this is being done for yet, but at least he knows that each of these evolved Shinju carry the chakra of those who they've consumed, which in hindsight explains Boruto's reaction when he saw Hidari. Now, Boruto could sense Sasuke's chakra from within him. That explains everything. Before Shikamaru can press Boruto any further, he's made aware of the fact that Kawaki is requesting to speak with him, and we get some much needed insight into how the Yamanaka clan's hidden jutsu, the mind transmission jutsu, works. From the moment that Konoha began using mind transmission to get around Ada's Semigon powers, there was a question by a lot of readers of, hey, what's to stop someone else from listening in on the conversation if they're part of the sensory unit? And now we know the truth. While the conversations are eventually logged, as Ino told us 2 chapters ago when Shikamaru and Boruto first made contact, each transmission between parties, it has its own independent link, so they can't be listened in on by a third party. So when Ino connects Shikamaru to Kawaki, Shikamaru is able to speak to Boruto on one channel and Kawaki on the other channel, and Kawaki would never be one the wiser to it. That's something that was needed a real quick explanation, because while it's common sense for the most part, as they say, common sense ain't that common. So you want to give as much information as quickly as possible to alleviate any doubt that people might have. Now, Kawaki informs Shikamaru that he and Delta, they're headed to Boruto's location now that Ada has located Boruto for them, and he lays out a really decent strategy that might have worked if it was anyone except for Boruto. Kawaki says, we're gonna have Delta attack Boruto from the skies, and while Boruto's distracted, I'm going to attack him from the ground. And in that split-second window that exists between Kawaki arriving and Boruto being able to sense him, that's when Kawaki would strike. However, Shikamaru tries to talk Kawaki out of attacking Boruto by warning him that, hey, Boruto's more skilled than he was before, yet Kawaki still wants all that smoke with Boruto. It's at this point that Boruto likely reads the situation on his own and tells Shikamaru, hey, leave in the village, see you Lord 8th Hokage, and he uses the flying Raijin to teleport away. This leads us to the moment where Kawaki looks annoyed at the fact that he just missed Boruto, and he and Delta, they have no idea how Boruto knew that they were coming or how he got away so quickly. We then move on to Ada, and she's lost in her thoughts, and she's being joined by Mitsuki, and this is where things get really interesting. Ada confronts Mitsuki for attacking Kawaki when his guard was lowered, and as a result, it leads to Ada informing Mitsuki that Kawaki wanted her to find Mitsuki so Kawaki could locate Boruto's location. But the conversation takes a drastic turn. Mitsuki starts telling Ada that until he met her, he never really knew what it means to feel love. Ada shuts all that down, saying, hey, I don't care if you got a tingly feeling in your loins, you're flirting with me, it ain't gonna work, you're better off going somewhere else. And Mitsuki concedes as much, but he gives her a shock that she wasn't expecting. Not everything is about her like she thinks. It wasn't so much that he was simping for Ada the way that every person who's affected by her power is forced to do, but Mitsuki points out that this was something deeper and he's being bugged by it. To paraphrase what he's saying, he wonders if he's reacting different because he's an artificial human, because as a reminder, Mitsuki, while he is Orochimaru's son, at the end of the day, he is literally a clone of Orochimaru himself on a genetic level. Mitsuki basically reveals that he had questions about himself as a result because of that fact, and he accepted it because in his mind, he always had a son, which for the longest time, due to his memory being altered, he believed that son to be Kawaki, but that conversation with Boruto, it has him raising doubts, which explains why the chapter opened up with Ada focusing in on that part of the conversation. It was foreshadowing meant to get us to this moment where Ada and Mitsuki have a quasi-philosophical conversation on the topic of love itself. Mitsuki has taken Boruto's words to heart by saying that he needs to believe in himself, because if he can't, he'll lose sight of what the son is to him, and it's important to keep that in mind. In chapter 7, Boruto tells Mitsuki that it's Mitsuki who gets to determine who and what is the son to him. Boruto in the same chapter tells him that he is more than capable of being his own son, that can shine on its own and it doesn't need the light of others. It was a subtle way and a symbolic way of saying that Mitsuki needs to learn to love himself first before he tries to find that sun that shines for him. And Mitsuki in this chapter with Ada is coming to that conclusion, and whether he realized it or not, he's trying to make her realize it as well, which is why he asks her, hey, why do you really love Kawaki? Now, from the moment that Boruto Naruto Next Generations first introduced Ada's character and she declared her love for Kawaki, a lot of people said that was coming off very shallow. She basically got turned on by the guy because he offered her something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Kawaki offered her excitement when she saw Kawaki trick Shiki and kill him, talking trash to him as he did so. It gave off vibes of, say, the girl next door being turned on by the bad boy, and we see here that Mitsuki's questioning if that's actually enough for Ada to feel love for Kawaki, and Ada describes that feeling that hopefully all of us have been fortunate enough to experience at some point in our lives. She says that thinking of Kawaki, it fills her heart with a tight pain, showing that what she feels for Kawaki, it does run deep, and it might not be infatuation. Could Ada be feeling true, genuine love for Kawaki that developed over the last 3 years or so? Or could this be her feeling the pain coming from the heartbreak of knowing that Kawaki merely sees her as a human GPS monitor and not as a potential partner? That much remains to be seen as of now. Ada flips the conversation back on to Mitsuki, saying that due to her ability, the emotions that Mitsuki's feeling, they're false love, and so he doesn't understand what real love is. But Mitsuki, he doesn't seem completely convinced, and he admits that he basically feared losing what he determined to be his son, whether it be real or whether it be fake, which leads to Ada taking a harder stance. To paraphrase what she's saying, she's in a roundabout way asking Mitsuki if he's wondering if her feelings for Kawaki aren't real but potentially fake as well, and she's confused as if Mitsuki's trying to go that route, and Ada pretty much goes, well, guess what, that's what being human is. The whole reason this conversation works so well is that it's showing us that when it comes to human nature, in particular when it comes to matters of the heart, there is no black and white answer. You love who you love for whatever reason. It's not something you can fully put into words oftentimes. It's not something that relies on logic. Love is anything but logical. It's illogical in of itself, if we're being honest here. And seeing Mitsuki as he is right now, as he's continuing through his evolution through the stages of humanity, clearly entering into a point where he's on the cusp of enlightenment, it's so fascinating to see these two talk. However, Mitsuki's words, they did strike something deep inside of Ada, and now she finds herself openly saying that she wants to speak to Boruto. This goes back to the joke earlier. Boruto added another person to his harem. Meanwhile, at the Ten-Tails hideout, Jura tells Hidari, hey, it's time for us to make our move. And we see something rather interesting here, which is that cube that they have at the base of their hideout. It directly connects to one of the claw grinds that is still running around the land of fire, positioning itself, and when Jura leans his head against it, he's able to teleport out of one of the markers on the back of the claw grind, and so too does Hidari. This leads to one of the boldest entrances that we've ever seen a villain do in the Naruto world. Itachi and Kisame, when they came to Konoha, they snuck in because Itachi knew the barrier code and they just went down the wall. Pain invaded from the skies. Jigen teleported into Naruto's living room. Totally disrespectful, but that was more so by accident right there. Jigen even apologized. Ishiki teleported in from the sky just above the village. These two, Jura and Hidari, they're literally standing outside the gates with their hands in their pockets, doing a whole ass pose, and they're planning to walk right through the front gates, and it's both hilarious and disrespectful because it shows how little they think of the defenses of the strongest ninja village in all of the 5 nations. As they walk right through the gates, not even bothering to hide their chakra signature. Ino is told by Shikamaru that regardless as to if she believes Boruto's story or not, she needs to keep the information that they had discussed to herself, and that's where Shikamaru learns that Sasuke's come through the gates, except we as the audience know this really isn't Sasuke, it's Hidari. But Shikamaru isn't the only one who knows this because that transmission went out to everyone. While the unlucky Chunin and Jonin assemble to head those two off, Sarada is the only Konoha shinobi alongside class rep who knows that the chakra they're sensing, it might belong to Sasuke, but it's not really Sasuke. And as she and the class rep are running to the location, Jura shows off a whole wide-scale wood-release jutsu that takes out shinobi faster than Ada can provide Shikamaru with the update that those two intruders, they're not really Sasuke and an unnamed person, they're really Shinju. This leads to Jura making a pit stop to the bookstore that he stumbles across, and we see that this guy's getting excited as he's walking through the bookstore looking for new books to take back to his hideout for that Shinju book club that he's seemingly setting up. But jokes aside though, we're seeing a continued thirst for knowledge that further confirms what we were told in chapter 4. These Shinju, they're evolving beyond their natural instinct to be used just to consume an Otsutsuki for a chakra fruit, and their awakening is continuing, and it's continuing rapidly. Some are going a little faster than others, because Hidari is a bit of a goofball in that he's calling out for Naruto Uzumaki, thinking that hey, he might be in this bookstore, which even Jura has that Saitama bruh face on, because he knows that the only books that Naruto will be looking at around here are pop-up books. They make music and sound effects, or he'll be looking at dirty magazines he hides from Hinata. However, before they get too complacent, Kawaki suddenly shoots out chakra rods at Hidari, and Hidari is able to sense and avoid them pretty much at point blank range, and that's really impressive because as we saw with Sasuke during that fight with Jigen and the next fight with Ishiki, Sasuke, even with his Rinnegan and Sharingan combination, he was unable to track the speed of those chakra rods. He could see them, but he couldn't track them until just before he got hit by them. Yet Hidari tracks them and avoids them easily, which is enough that we can start that conversation of Hidari stronger than Rinnegan Sasuke, who fought against Jigen and Ishiki. As Hidari leaps into the air, Kawaki hits him with a drop kick, and as he and Delta get ready for combat, Jura steps out of the bookstore telling Kawaki that hey, I'm not gonna eat you, but fam, you better not damage these books in this bookstore. And before Kawaki can react, Jura summons a giant tree from underneath the ground to trap Kawaki, but Kawaki quickly counters by using Sukuna Hikona to shrink himself and resize behind Jura, but it's all to no avail. Jura, with one punch, he shatters Kawaki's ninja tech weapon made from Kawaki's chakra, and despite Kawaki having the Karma still activated, Jura one-shots this guy with his next attack, but not before telling him that he isn't going to eat Kawaki just yet, and he tells Kawaki disrespectfully stay put because he's got other things to attend to. Kawaki gets sent flying across the village into a water tank, and as Delta races after Kawaki, Jura is shown flying in the air, looking in the opposite direction of Kawaki, saying out loud he's found Naruto, and that is very interesting. Jura thinks he's found Naruto, but the dynamic is interesting because it's dramatic irony in that we in the audience, we know that Jura should be looking at Kawaki because Kawaki sealed Naruto in that Daikoku dimension, which means Jura might think he senses Naruto, but he clearly doesn't, and he doesn't have a connection to the Daikoku dimension because otherwise he'd know that's where Naruto is and that Kawaki has access to it. Jura states that because Naruto is a Jinchuriki who possesses a tail beast, he can sense Naruto, and it's because Jura himself is the incarnation of that tail beast, because the 10 tails is where the 9 Biju were made when Hagoromo performed the creation of all things to create the 9 Biju. It's natural that he can sense Naruto, or what he believes is Naruto. As Jura and Hidari fly off, and as Kawaki is put to sleep for the second time in 3 chapters, again Kawaki's stocks are going down. Shikadai is leading the members of Team 10 and Himawari, and he's giving them orders on how they're going to handle the person they believe is Sasuke and the other intruder. But just as they begin to turn the corner, Hidari and Jura, they drop down in front of them, and we get the plot twist of the century. The person that Jura has been sensing is Himawari Uzumaki, and that's where we end off the chapter. And what we're seeing now is one of many subversions of expectations that Boruto 2 Blue Vortex does, and this pays off what Damon said in Boruto Part 1, which is that Himawari has a hidden power. So chapter 9 picks up where the last one left off, immediately keeping his foot on the gas. In the last chapter, we had that mega cliffhanger of Himawari staring down Jura and Hidari, and Jura looking at Himawari, completely confused as to why he could sense Biju chakra inside of her. And this chapter continues to face off with Jura taking particular interest in her, staring daggers at Himawari, and this ultimately leads to Inojin protectively placing his hand between Himawari and Jura to serve as a protective barrier between them, because Himawari, despite being on what looks like an open battlefield, is completely unprepared for what's in front of her, and Shikadai sees right away that things are not going to go easily, and his mind is racing 1,000 miles per minute as he assesses the situation. This ultimately helps the story in a few ways if we're being honest here. It shows us that for all the combat training that Himawari's done over the last 3 years, none of that training really matters when you come face to face with the real thing. In situations like this where life life throws you an unexpected curveball. When you least expect it, you either swing and you hit or you strike out. There are just some moments that no amount of preparation can get you ready for. With Himawari, we see something interesting that goes back to what the Boruto Kages were trying to tell Naruto back in the anime in episode 24. Whereas Naruto was pretty certain that the new generation had multiple young shinobi who would surpass all the 5 Kage gathered at the table with Naruto, his Kage peers, they were skeptical because the new generation, they've grown up in a different era. In short, due to no fault of their own, they're spoiled. For this new generation, training exercises like Naruto played with Boruto and Naruto Gaiden, the 7th Hokage in the Scarlet Spring, where Naruto trained Boruto using shadow clones, those were simply games to them. And with Naruto's era, they were training because they didn't have a choice. They were in open cold warfare with the other nations. They were training for missions where they might not come home from. In this era now, things have gotten very peaceful in the ninja world, where being a ninja is elective. Once they reach a certain point at the academy, they either choose to become shinobi or they go into general studies to be a normal civilian, which is what most people do. And the ones who do become ninjas, they don't have a ton of missions to choose from, to the point that A rank missions that used to be for Jonin, they can be cleared by tuning and super skilled gaining like the members of Boruto's Team 7. Himawari freezing up here, that is a byproduct of the times. She doesn't know what to do in the situation despite her training for the situation. Her mind might know what to do, but her body isn't reacting at the same speed as her mind potentially is, as she's being stared down under the gaze of an apex predator like Jura. Shikadai knows for a fact that they are no match for the duo of Hidari and Jura, and you can see the reality setting in. Whatever they thought they were going to be able to do against what they assumed were Boruto and Sasuke, they're not going to be able to do anything against the 2 Shinju in front of them. All that training for the last 3 years, it might have just come up short, but when forced into a situation like this, you either go out in a blaze of glory or you run like a coward. Shikadai, despite being on edge and clearly trying to buy time, is still a bit shaky, and this much is evident by Jura just casually producing a book from the cloak that he has of that claw mark cloak on his shoulders, and we literally see the guy so unserious that he's flipping through pages of his book. A nice callback to how Killer B was writing down lyrics from his debut album Views from the Clouds while he was fighting Sasuke and Team Taka, because he knew he could strike them down at any moment. He wasn't bothered. Jura tells him as much, saying that he doesn't have any interest in the members of Team 10. The only one he's there for is Himawari, and somewhere Naruto is floating around in Kawaki's dimension, unaware that the genetics he gave to Himawari, they carry a hidden curse. Jura doesn't give the members of Team 10 a chance to prepare any formations that they might have been practicing the last 3 years. With the blink of an eye, he catches them off guard by using wood release that shoots up out the ground, and he's intending to capture Himawari the same way he tried to capture Kawaki last chapter. Now, this is where we do have to give some credit to Team 10. Longtime viewers of the channel, you know that I've been pretty harsh on Team 10. I've given them their flowers before, but I've been pretty brutal in the past as well, in particular when it comes to them getting caught off guard. Like the way that Amato, someone who isn't even a shinobi, was able to use deception to take them down using ninja tools and calculated bluffs like that bomb he placed on Shikadai's neck. Well, right here we see Team 10, they're very sharp in their response. Shikadai sees what's going on and immediately uses the shadow sowing jutsu to wrap around the tree that is attempting to trap Himawari and slow down its progression by pulling against the trunk and its limb. Now, Inojin, he does live up to his words from the last chapter and uses the Super Beast scroll jutsu to produce a frog that manages to rip Himawari out the tree just as it begins to fully capture her, and it flings her to Chocho, who leaps forward and catches her before she falls and hurts herself. While we see Jura is less than pleased with these developments, it's worth noting that Team 10, at the very least, they make the correct call, which is they know they need to escape because the enemy in front of them is too powerful to take on as they are now and without proper backup. And that, my friends, is a sign of growth. It is a sign that at the very least, in terms of battle decision-making decisions, they're already at a tuning level, because part of leadership is knowing when to retreat and not continue fighting a losing battle when you're at a clear disadvantage. However, there's a problem with all of this. Shikamaru basically gets made aware of what's going on with Shikadai, and he has to make a very, very brutal decision, which is that he can't tell his son to run away. He's got to think as a Hokage and not as a father, because he's made aware of the fact that Jura is of the belief that the Nine Tails is in the village. He's been asking for Naruto's location, and for whatever reason, he can sense Himawari has the Nine Tails chakra, and this throws Shikamaru for a loop because Kurama's been dead for 3 years. And this is one moment that I don't think will get appreciated enough by fans, so I'm gonna give Shikamaru his flowers here. What we're seeing here is that Shikamaru is able to do the one thing that Naruto couldn't do in Boruto Naruto Next Generations, to the point that it was literally the core part of his character arc, which is the balance of being Hokage and father. Naruto, when push came to shove, he was never truly able to set aside his personal feelings and his responsibilities as a father for his greater responsibilities as a Hokage. Well, here's the thing, Shikamaru, he isn't just talking the talk that he told Naruto after Boruto's killed by Kawaki in chapter 67, where he says that Naruto's duty as Hokage called for him to mourn Boruto later, respect Boruto's decision as a shinobi to die, and to assist Kawaki in killing Koji. Shikamaru in this moment, he's walking the very talk that he told Naruto. He puts aside his own feelings as a father, and he wears his Hokage cap proud, which is something you gotta believe is very painful for him to do, because Shikadai is his only son. So Amato, he's watching this whole scene with Kawaki, and he sees Kawaki knocked unconscious, something that seems to be a reoccurring theme with Kawaki throughout part 2 of the series, and he immediately begins to work on his end to try to revive Kawaki. And what's interesting about this is the concern on Amato's face, and it's moments like this that really put into perspective for you how much Amato has riding on Kawaki. He can't afford to lose the guy at all, because the Karma Seal Kawaki carries contains the genetic data of his daughter, who Amato wants to revive. So Amato doesn't hesitate to remotely revive Kawaki by using ninja tech. We then shift over to Kashin Koji and Boruto in what appears to be Orochimaru's hideout, which the dead giveaway being it literally looks like the exact same hideout that Naruto and Sasuke visited in Naruto Gaiden, though there are a few aesthetic changes since that was drawn by the Naruto series creator Masashi Kishimoto, and Boruto 2 Blue Vortex is drawn by Kishimoto's assistant Mikio Ikimoto. But the giveaway that you see here is there's a snake on the wall right behind Kashin Koji. Kashin Koji and Boruto, as they're discussing the developments, it's worth noting that as Kashin Koji tells Boruto that Jura and Hidari are on the move now, Boruto is looking down at his Karma Seal with a troubled look on his face, and somewhere Momoshiki fans are starting down the countdown timer, because it shows that Boruto's still worried about his Karma Seal, and our boy Momoshiki is licking his lips thinking about hijacking the body of Boruto, who has now become so strong and base that he literally scales above Jigen. But before Boruto can get too lost in his own thoughts, he's got to move, because he learns that his sister Himawari is in danger and that Konoha shinobi have already been killed. He learns about the Konoha shinobi from Kashin Koji, and he learns about his sister Himawari once he gets back into the village. But in each instance, he's been spurred into action. These are his thumb screws. And just the news about Konoha alone is enough to make the guy use a flying Raijin to get back to the village. But when he learns about Himawari, he acts urgently. And what we see here is what the 48 Laws of Power discusses in Law number 33, which is that every man has a thumb screw, a weakness that will be their downfall. And for Boruto, that thumb screw is Himawari. The guy was just literally sitting there recovering after spamming flying Raijin several times all day and fighting multiple battles, from Code to the Shinju ganging up on him to fighting against Mitsuki, and now the guy doesn't hesitate to teleport back to Konoha. Rightfully so, because his sister is in danger, and so too is his village. That over eagerness to protect his sister, it might lead to his downfall in the future. Now, what's interesting here is that back in Konoha, Shikamaru, as he's monitoring Shikadai's battle, he's come to the conclusion that the Shinju, in particular Jura, they aren't mindless brutes that the claw grimes that Code brought to the village were, where they just attacked anything that walked. They were mindlessly seeking out people to consume their chakra. But these evolved Shinju, they're only after specific targets, and based off of what he's seen, he's concerned that Jura only wants Himawari and is not interested in anyone else. And in that respect, he's very similar to Ishiki. Ishiki wanted Kawaki when he came to Konoha, but he wasn't going there to attack anyone. But instead, Ishiki only attacked when he had to retaliate. Jura right now is giving off the same vibe, which is very interesting to say the least. And as he's in the Hokage office, one of the toads appears and tells him not to turn around because obviously Ada is watching, and he's connected to Boruto, who's now back in the village. However, our 8th Hokage, he might have spoken a little bit too soon when he was thinking to himself that Jura won't harm anyone else, because Jura states he's no longer gonna hold back because he is annoyed with the members of Team 10 constantly getting in his way, and we see the terrified look on Himawari's face because that apex predator is finally on the hunt, and she's a cute little fox frozen in fear. Meanwhile, just as Amato finishes remotely waking Kawaki up and boosting him, Kawaki immediately senses a new challenger in the arena, and his mind doesn't go to the Shinju that just whooped his ass, but instead his eyes light up in fury at the one person he's been blinded with for the last 3 years, Boruto Uzumaki. The prodigal son, he's finally returned home and he's taking in the situation. He sees that several Konoha shinobi, they've been killed, while he also gets an update from the toad that's stored away in his cloak. However, before our concerned big brother can fly off to save his little sister, Kawaki appears behind him with Delta serving as backup, and we see Kawaki basically say it's time for them to settle things, but Boruto does the same thing to Kawaki that I do whenever Cody Rhodes cuts a promo on TV. Boruto says, I don't have time for this mess, and what's interesting here is that Kawaki looks annoyed, especially when Boruto tells him, hey man, the village is under attack, don't you got better things to be doing? And Kawaki's line about Boruto being a threat to the village, being an enemy to the village, it has a deeper meaning. Kawaki's actively seeking out this confrontation with Boruto for other reason, and he's doing so subconsciously. When you look at it from Kawaki's perspective, this is the second time Boruto has told him that he isn't his priority. The first time it was Code and the Ten Tails, and this time is saving Himawari. What I like about this is that it shows a clear distinction between the two. Kawaki is so blinded by his obsession with Naruto and protecting Naruto and his justified fear that Boruto is a danger to Naruto who needs to be killed, but Boruto, he's calm, he's cool, collected, and focused on the bigger picture. This leads us to Boruto dodging Kawaki's sneak attack to shoot out those chakra rods at him, which only serves to further annoy Boruto because fighting Kawaki is not something he wants to do, particularly while Himawari is in danger, yet Boruto has no choice. Boruto calmly dodges another set of chakra rods shot at him, and despite Kawaki now transforming his arm using ninja tech to fight Boruto, Boruto calmly walks towards Kawaki and then speed blitzes him suddenly before Kawaki can react and sends Kawaki flying backwards with a warning punch, not even a full power punch. And to add insult to injury, Boruto instructs Delta, hey, go patch this dude up and take care of him, I got business to take care of, all while Kawaki is hunched over in a quasi-fetal position, holding his stomach and pissed off that Boruto basically pawned him off to Delta. And to add further insult to injury, Boruto basically says like, hey bro, do you even train? That one punch with Boruto holding back, just a calm punch, it was enough for Kawaki to realize he's got to activate his version 1 karma because he viewed Boruto as being that big of a threat. But by doing so, Boruto's own worst nightmare unfolds. His own karma seal begins to activate. Much like we've seen in the past, Boruto and Kawaki's karma seals have a resonance, and Boruto freaks out and starts grabbing his hand before flying off, and it's because of Momoshiki taking control of his body, which is still a problem. And Kawaki takes note of the fact that Boruto saw the karma seal cut on, he freaked out and he flew away. Now we then shift back over to Team 10, and now Inojin has managed to save Himawari from another attack, and Shikadai is using the shadow possession jutsu to restrain Jura, but Shikadai makes the mistake of taunting Jura by saying, hey, you can't afford to get distracted because we're your opponents, and Jura just basically picks violence. He closes one Rinnegan eye, and with the other Rinnegan, a small Biju Dama forms right in front of it, and he prepares to shoot it off at Shikadai, which, Jesus, that is cruel when you think about it, because Shikadai's grandfather was killed by a Biju Dama. But Chocho comes in clutch by using the Yang release expansion jutsu to grab hold of Jura and fling him away, but in doing so, the Biju Dama fires off and destroys a chunk of the village, and the shockwaves and the smoke can be seen as far back as the area where Sarada and Class Rep are running to attempt to provide backup, with Shikadai watching as Inojin tries to get Himawari to safety since she's Jura's target, and for good measure, Inojin grabs hold of the members of of Team 10, and he attempts to get them out of it because they realize if this fight drags on, then they won't survive long enough for the reinforcements that Shikamaru spoke of to arrive. However, unfortunately for them, Jura, he isn't planning on letting them go, and he gives chase, more annoyed now than ever before. And we get a very brilliant panel where Himawari basically says, these guys are after me, I've got to leave the village. But that leads us to the ending of the chapter, the controversial ending of the chapter, where Himawari suddenly goes into a trance and she's now inside the Biju sanctuary inside of her body, and our precious little Himawari doesn't understand what's happening because for the first time ever, she's experiencing what all Jinchuriki have experienced, that being summoned into that inner sanctuary that all the Biju sealed inside of Jinchuriki share. And we see a miniature version of the Nine Tails standing behind Himawari, and he asks Himawari if she knows who he is, and that's the major cliffhanger that we leave off of the chapter. Now, you might be going, wait a second, Kurama died, like Barryamo happened, so why is he alive? Well, good news for you is there are answers that we're about to be given in just a moment. So we open up the chapter where the last one left off. Jura is watching Inojin fly with Himawari and all the other members of Team 10, getting them off to safety, running for their lives because they realized that Jura, he was that level 100 floor boss and they didn't have enough health bars or the right equipment to continue fighting. So they did the smart thing and they retreated. This leads to Jura remarking that escape from him, it is pointless, and that makes sense. They are flying away from a guy who can literally compress the power of a 10 Tails Biju Dama down into a pint-sized ball and fire it off. It's like trying to run away from Sukuna's domain expansion. Unless you are literally the fastest guy in the verse, you can't escape it, and that's the level of speed that Team 10 needs to get away from somebody like Jura. But thankfully for them, Jura, he isn't quite yet ready to choose violence. He takes note of the fact that Team 10, they want to move the location of the battlefield away from the village area because they don't want the village to get destroyed. This is, as we've seen in the Boruto Naruto Next Generation story, it is a very common tactic. If a fight breaks out in the village, one of two things tends to occur. Number one, you do what Naruto did against Delta, where they fought at the Hokage's private training grounds next door to the academy, and Naruto mostly kept the battle strictly to taijutsu, and he was trying to lead the battle away from the kids that are watching, and he limited the area damage when he does use chakra-based ninjutsu to avoid the headline 7th Hokage blows up the village. Number two, if there is an option to move the fight outside the village, you do so the first chance you get. Hiruzen Sarutobi attempted that during the Nine Tails attack when he forced the Nine Tails outside the village in the manga in volume 53, which that's also what Boruto and Sasuke did when Naruto and Ishiki destroyed a small part of the village with their short taijutsu exchange. What's interesting here is that Jura is regarding them with a little bit of respect and, dare I say it, a little bit of curiosity, which that is in character for him. He's not someone who just goes from 0 to 10 right away. Even when he previously fought the members of Team 10, the only one who he was diverting any real heat towards, that was Himawari, and he was looking to avoid too much with Team 10 in terms of violence until they forced his hand by continuing to fight him. However, what we see here is that Jura has taken notice of Team 10 flying off, but before he can do much of anything, Konoha has led the way to the battlefield with a team of small jonin with them, and the usage of Konoha here is both a gift and a curse. One of the things we saw in Boruto Naruto Next Generations is that as each arc passed by in the manga, Konohamaru's role, it gradually decreased, especially once each of his students surpassed him by the third arc of the manga, where the only advantage he really had was he was more experienced as a shinobi. Well, we're now in a sequel to that very same manga, and on one hand, seeing Konohamaru as the advisor of the 8th Hokage with a small team with him on the battlefield under his command, that's really cool to see because he's showing an unwavering loyalty to the village. He's showing that Shikamaru trusts him. He's also just happening to do all this amazing stuff against two very, very powerful targets, which means that losing streak in that new era is gonna continue to rack up. When Konohamaru arrives, he informs Shikamaru that Team 10, it isn't in the location anymore, but the two intruders still are, and Shikamaru informs Konohamaru that Team 10 and Himawari, they've managed to escape and are attempting to move the battlefield away from the village, and this is where it gets very interesting. Shikamaru brings everyone up to speed about what's going on and that Himawari is the target of the two awakened Shinju, and upon hearing this, Kawaki immediately snaps to attention, and this is a pretty big moment for Kawaki's character. It shows that beneath that cold exterior that we've seen, there's still the heart of that young boy who Naruto saw good inside of when he brought him into the village. He let Kawaki sleep with him in his office, and this is the narrative taking the time to show us that while Kawaki might have done some rather questionable things in the past, some things that fans likely will never forgive him for, there are still those embers of goodness burning inside of him, and he does have a capacity to care for someone other than Naruto, because we see it here. When Himawari called him big bro, it was a pretty clear sign that there was some guilt fueling his response when he tells her, "How many times have I told you not to call me that?" And the hurt look on her face showed that this likely happened over 9,000 different times during the 3 years. Right here though, the moment that he hears Himawari's in danger, Kawaki looks pissed off. He looks shocked, and it's a moment that shines a little bit of light through the dark clouds that have been gathered around Kawaki. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the village, we have Boruto, and he's so scared that the guy, he's struggling to catch his breath. He's got sweat beads that are dripping down his face, and he's holding his arm where the karma seal has spread, and this, my friends, is more important than you might think. It's just one more sign that what Amado told Boruto in chapter 69 of Boruto Part 1 was correct. Momoshiki can still hijack his body, and if he doesn't continue taking the Byakugan suppressant drugs, Momoshiki will be a problem. And Boruto's fear right now, it is at an all-time high because of the circumstances. All of this is happening at the worst possible moment. His adopted brother, he wants to kill him, but Boruto doesn't share that same feeling. He wants to work things out with Kawaki, which is irrelevant because if he loses control, Momoshiki, he's got other plans for Kawaki. If you have Boruto who knows the truth about Himawari and that she's being hunted down by the awakened Shinju, like we saw Shikamaru tell him in the last chapter, and despite the fact that he wants to go give chase and protect his sister because he's her natural big brother, even if nobody remembers it, he can't do it because he's a liability right now due to not being able to properly control his karma. This, my friends, is the perfect example of good external conflict manifesting and clashing with the external conflict of the story. Very good for Boruto's character. This is what makes Shikamaru's words to Kawaki so ironic here, which is that Boruto shouldn't be a priority for him right now because they all share a common enemy in those awakened Shinju. And while he is right, Boruto's fear of the karma also backs up Kawaki's claim that Boruto's still a threat because of Momoshiki, but thankfully, even Kawaki can set aside his hate for Boruto long enough to agree to go save Himawari, and he even makes it a point to come across as annoyed by the fact that Shikamaru didn't reveal this information about Himawari sooner. But the irony of that is that Boruto told him in the last chapter, instead of worrying about him, why doesn't Kawaki focus on protecting the village? And as we'll see in a moment, Kawaki's about to learn there are consequences for his actions because something that happens at the end of the chapter could have been prevented if he listened to Boruto. While Kawaki and Delta fly off to provide reinforcements to Himawari and Team 10, Shikamaru checks in on Boruto, whose karma has stayed active, and the toad that has Kashin Koji planted on Boruto looks equally as troubled, alluding to the fact that Momoshiki, the boogeyman problem, is still very much an issue and that Boruto is going to be sidelined for a while, which in all honesty, that's the right decision. We have multiple battles being set up right now. Putting Boruto on the sideline for a moment, that is the right call because even if it's only for half a chapter to say a full chapter, it allows for the other characters to get their moment so we as readers can see the important information like where these characters scale and also see how the various interactions all add to or take away from their character development, or if they're flat one-dimensional characters, whether or not they continue to serve their role well or whether or not they get replaced. Back in the central business district, Hidari, he's staring down Konohamaru and his team, and as he does so, he's following Jura's lead on what to do with Konohamaru's group, and Jura's basically like, yo dog, I'm leaving the light work to you, by basically flying off to give chase on Himawari, and Konohamaru takes note of their direction. Yet before he can do anything, Hidari, he just shows up right in front of Konohamaru, and this leads to an exchange between the two groups, and Konohamaru drops some rather important information for us as readers when he checks with the central unit about, hey, you told me that Sasuke was the one here, and they say, hey, he is standing right in front of you. Now this leads to something very interesting because it adds to what we know. The awakened Shinju, they have the chakra of the Ten Tails, they have the chakra of White Karma Seal Code, and they have the chakra of the people who they bit to become awakened Shinju, and they have features that look like them, but to the people in universe, they can't tell the difference, which I can see that to a degree. Outside of Code, who recognized the bug Shinju as being bugged, and Boruto, who recognized Hidari as being Sasuke, we haven't really seen much recognition. Based on the cover for chapter 8, we know that the skin complexion of the awakened Shinju, it is different. If they all have Jura's complexion, then they have a darker skin tone than the people they got their chakra from. So that could be what's throwing people off. This is important to keep in mind because of what happens next. The introduction of Hidari's main target, Sarada. The moment that Konohamaru calls out to Sarada and class rep who finally arrives on the scene behind Sarada, Hidari's eyes, they narrow and the guy immediately starts wanting all the smoke with Sarada. In the span of a few seconds, Hidari not only vanishes inside the claw mark that he was standing on, but he simultaneously produced a line of 3 claw marks in a brilliant way that weren't previously there, in front and behind Sarada and behind class rep. Essentially, he's hoping to checkmate each of them. He can attack either one of them from the front or from behind and do so in mere moments. And he attempts to do just that by going straight after Sarada from the blind side with the Chidori, aiming it forward before class rep can react. And in the same span of time, Sarada not only cuts on a Sharingan, she dodges the attack and she counters with her own Chidori, which doesn't need the use of hand signs to use, and she tags Hidari with her own Chidori that sends him onto the ground, doing damage to him before class rep and Konohamaru can take 3 steps towards him, and Hidari hits the ground moments before the other two can reach Sarada. At this point, we need to start calling Sarada our tribal chief, like her name is Roman Reigns, because she is levels above. I'm not going to go over the scaling here for where Sarada is at the end of part 1 and where she might be right now, because I did a conservative video already scaling exactly where Sarada is at the end of Boruto part 1. So the only real things I will say here are these 2 things. Number 1, we have some basis for where Hidari and the other Shinju already scale based off of information prior. The brief skirmishes that Boruto had with them in chapter 4, chapter 6, where the narrative used Ada to say that they're in a different league than Code without limiters, and chapter 2, where Boruto flat out tells Code, you need to destroy the 10 tails before you are unable to annihilate it, which that lines up directly with the awakened Shinju scaling above Code, and that backs up Ada's assertion that they're in a different league than Code, because otherwise Boruto wouldn't have said you couldn't annihilate them. Number 2, Sarada, before her conversation with Boruto in chapter 6, she spent the last 3 years for the first time in her life feeling hatred, and hatred is one of the powers that we are told repeatedly in Naruto's manga. It directly strengthens both the Sharingan and the Mangekyo Sharingan. She knows that Kawaki killed Boruto, that he tried to kill him yet again, and he almost was able to kill Sarada, but Boruto got his scar protecting her, and then he stole Boruto's life. And until her conversation with Boruto, Sarada was under the impression that Kawaki killed the man who she admired the most, the 7th Hokage. That is a ton of hate to power Sarada as she embarked on her first real training arc and was starting out at a floor that was a clear Kage level. However, we're going to move along and keep the review flowing. Sarada is then shown explaining to Konohamaru, and by extension us as the audience, that the jutsu that Hidari used on her, it was Sasuke Chidori, and she's staring a hole through Hidari trying to figure out who he is. And this is very poetic because it goes back to and reverses the very first meeting between Sasuke and Sarada that we have in printed format, which is their meeting in Naruto Gaiden, the 7th Hokage in the Scarlet Spring, where Sarada recognizes her father, but he doesn't recognize her. Now the roles, they have been reversed. But what is heartbreaking is that Boruto, he didn't tell her this information about Hidari despite him knowing the truth. Maybe you could chalk it up to he didn't have time to, because Mitsuki did ambush him in chapter 6 before they could finish talking. But that Sarada versus Hidari battle, when it picks back up in a moment, it's going to be very emotional. This is where we shift over to the real meat and potatoes of the chapter, which is Kurama's revival. After the cliffhanger at the end of the prior chapter, everyone was left wondering what in the world is going on with Kurama being inside of Himawari, and now we are getting answers as to why Kurama was respawned inside of her and not out in the wild like Biju normally are. So after Himawari asked Kurama why is he inside of her when she wasn't a Jinchuriki like her father, Kurama tells her that they're in a shared visual plane where they can communicate because they are both of the same mind and body now. And as Kurama speaking to Himawari, we have Team 10 freaking out because Himawari, she hasn't moved, and Jura, he's giving chase to them and he is quickly catching up. Kurama basically gives a refresher for fans who forgot what Naruto's manga told us repeatedly. When a Biju dies, dies, they are ultimately resurrected. Even if both their bodies and their soul perishes, they still reappear. Basically, they are the representation of the cycle of samsara, which is what all the six past powers are rooted in. That's basically the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. While burial mode was different in that losing Biju chakra does not kill a Jinchuriki like it normally does, it still killed Kurama, which, as a quick reminder, because I know some of you guys are probably wondering, is this both halves of Kurama inside of Himawari? The answer to that is yes. Baby Kurama has both halves because the Kurama who died possessed both the yang half of Kurama that Naruto was born with and that Madara extracted from Naruto before he became a Ten-Tails Jinchuriki, and the yin half of Kurama that Obito sealed into Naruto to keep Naruto from dying. Now, this is where we get our big bombshell and the most controversial part of the chapter. Kurama says that the amount of time a Biju takes to reform or where they respawn, it isn't set in stone, which prior to this, we only had very loose ideas for about how long it would take a Biju to respawn via the Three Tails being in two different Jinchuriki in a short time span, with Rin Nohara getting the Three Tails sealed inside of her during the Third Ninja War, and then Yagura, the fourth Mizukage, somehow ended up getting the Three Tails sometime after that, and then Obito and Deidara ended up capturing the Three Tails in the Naruto manga 3 years after Yagura died. But Kurama reveals that Himawari was born with a fragment of his chakra, and that's what points us to Kurama respawning inside of Himawari of all people. It should be worth noting that this is the first time in history of the Naruto franchise that we have seen a male Jinchuriki have children, but the franchise, it has told us that there are unexpected and unexplained complications when it comes to Jinchuriki and them having children, which that might be why we rarely see Jinchuriki have children. So allow me to explain. So in Naruto Volume 53, when we go back to the flashback that Kushina had where she's telling Naruto, hey, this is how you are born, minus all the birds and the bees stuff, but basically on the night that you were born, this is what happened. When a female Jinchuriki is in the process of childbirth, the chakra of a Biju, it can escape the body of a Jinchuriki because the seal, it is weakening. However, we've never been told what the complication is for a male Jinchuriki when they have children, and now we see what it is. The Biju chakra does get passed on to the children, a fragmented piece. But if you're the Kage of a village, the reason why you forbid a male Jinchuriki from doing something like this is because not every person, including people who share the same blood as you, there's no guarantee they're going to be compatible with the Biju. With the Nine Tails, this is even more so the case because out of all the Uzumaki they could have chosen, Kushina was picked because she had rare chakra even amongst the Uzumaki clan. Naruto and Mito, that's not like his great-great-grandmother or anything like that. But I bring that up to say this, there's more depth to it than you would really think about on a surface level at first, but my video on where did Himawari's Biju chakra come from goes more in depth, so watch that if you still have questions. So after Kurama and Himawari, they take the next few moments to start accepting the situation they're in, with Kurama once again being bound to another Uzumaki and Himawari now being a Jinchuriki. They formally introduce themselves and Kurama gives Himawari back control of her consciousness, and not a moment too soon because Jura, he isn't just closing in on Team 10, but he's getting so close to Himawari that she's already beginning to freak out because Jura, he's preparing another Biju Dama to fire off at her and her friends, and Himawari is showing us that once again, you can do all the training you want, and Himawari, she's been training hard for the last 3 years, but there is no real substitute for true combat experience, and this is her first time being pursued by someone who is specifically targeting her and wants to do more than lightly spar with her, and she is out of her element, very much so the same way that, say, Sakura was when her and Chio, they fought against Sasori. Sakura, as Chio tells us, was more than capable of dodging the attacks of Sasori, but when the fight first started, Sakura had never faced bloodlust like this before. She started doubting her training because of how experienced Sasori was, and Chio had to give her that confidence boost. So Jura, he shoots off his Biju Dama at the wing of the ink bird that Inojin produced, and as they begin to start going crashing down towards the ground, let us take a moment here to both appreciate the calculation of Jura here as well as the skill of Jura, once again showing that he's on a different level than the awakened Shinju, and by extension that makes him even deadlier because the guy, he just targeted the wing in order to avoid doing too much damage to Himawari, all while compressing down the Biju Dama to that size and restricting the area damage on top of of that. And this is even more so impressive when you realize that he views the members of Team 10 as fodder that he can kill. If Himawari is the main dish, the members of Team 10, they're the appetizer. The next thing we need to appreciate is that Chocho, she does some quick thinking and she uses her clan's hidden jutsu, the Yang release expansion jutsu, to blow up her stomach to a giant size so that everyone that can get on her back and her shoulders and they can hold on for dear life, while she uses that extra belly rolls and love handles in order to absorb the impact from falling on the ground. But based on the impact, Inojin appeared to have at least gotten a considerable amount of distance away from the Hidden Leaf Village, and even Jura notes the potential of Team 10 and their teamwork in particular, but he laments the fact that it doesn't matter because he's gonna have to kill them because he's forced them to. Basically, if they stood aside and they allowed him to eat Himawari, he wouldn't have to kill them, but as we all know, that was never going to happen. So when Himawari once again begins to start freaking out, showing her inexperience, Kurama finally speaks up, basically telling Himawari that, hey, it's pointless to start crying and acting like a baby and freaking out, because in short, this is all going to be up to you, whether or not she wants it. Himawari is a Jinchuriki now, and as a Jinchuriki, your fate is to either be used as a tool of war, is to be used as a sword and a shield for protection, or it is to be hunted down by those who are intrigued by your power. And that's where she is currently. That is her fate. Just as Sasuke told Boruto in Boruto Naruto Next Generations chapter 80 that if he was truly Naruto's son, he could endure whatever life threw at him. And that Boruto, like Naruto, had no choice but to endure. Kurama, without using as many words and without saying the exact same thing, he tells her in a way, hey, this is all up to you. You've got to suck it up, little girl. He says he can give her all the power that she wants, but it's on her if it's used properly or wasted. Her fate, and Kurama's fate by extension, it is in Himawari's hands, and that makes a lot of sense. She's in the same boat that Naruto's in, so allow me to explain what I mean. So Naruto, for a majority of the series, he had less than desirable chakra control, despite being 16-year-old Naruto in base, who with no Kurama had 4 times the chakra of Kakashi. Nobody would say he was 4 times stronger than Kakashi. Base to base, you could argue Akatsuki suppression art Kakashi would whoop the mess out of Naruto if he couldn't use Kurama's chakra during that time, because he wasn't able to properly control all this chakra without wasting it. So he couldn't use chakra to properly amp up his physical stats like Tsunade does when she gets extra strength for power and combines it with her chakra control, like the Raikage does with his speed, or like Kakashi does when he extends his stamina when he uses the Sharingan. Naruto, when using one half of Kurama in the Akatsuki suppression art, was stated to have 100 times the chakra of Kakashi, but again, he wasted a lot of his chakra, which is why when he gained close to perfect chakra control in the early part of the war, he was an absolute monster. He was able to do damage to Kisame, and when he got full perfect chakra control, Naruto became an even bigger monster, to where he was knocking on the door to Hashirama's level of power before Naruto got the 6-pass amp. What Kurama is telling Himawari is that how all this plays out, it is up to you, but before he eventually gives her his chakra to use, he says that her chakra, it is greater than every Jinchuriki that came before her that he was attached to. So that includes her father, that includes Kushina, that includes Mito. Now, this is where this gets very interesting. So it comes down to what translation you use. So is Kurama referring to the quality of her chakra, or was he referring to the quantity of her chakra? And that's where it does get tricky, because due to Japanese not translating word to word into English, due to Japanese having multiple alphabets, there being words in English that don't really exist in Japanese, and Japanese being such a context heavy language, you can make an argument for both in that regard. You could say high quality in that she's more compatible with Kurama than any other Jinchuriki prior, or you could say a higher quantity of chakra than Naruto, which would explain why Damon said he sensed the monster power inside of her, capable of dodging his attacks. In order to see which this is, we're gonna have to continue reading a little bit and get more context. Now, this also leads to Himawari, and she's charging forward to Jura, and she's doing so on base, and that's very commendable. But she runs into the problem that Team 10 did, which is she doesn't have enough experience points to participate in this battle, and Jura, he very coldly breaks her ankle and tosses her to the ground. Very similar to how Ishiki snapped Boruto's arm when Boruto got in the way. Only in this case, Jura, he decides to take it a step further, and he traps Himawari in a wood release, telling her, hey, that pain in your legs is gonna subside soon once I eat you and once the tree fully takes root. And this is where we see a moment that will likely break the heart of Ino fans everywhere. So what we have here is that Inojin is basically living up to his promise to protect Himawari no matter what. Like he said when they're rushing to the battlefield to confront Hidari and Jura when they first arrived, and as Jura began battling the members of Team 10 in the last chapter, and we see Inojin paying extra attention to Himawari, being very careful when it comes to her. All signs are pointing towards Inojin, that boy is gonna be in trouble. So Inojin basically gets promptly taken out with a kick to his gut when he charges up to Jura with the intention to free Himawari, and then he gets a wood release branch that impales him right through the middle of his stomach, and it leaves this kid leaking out fluids like he's an OnlyFans model. And the only real hope that Inojin fans have right now is that might have been an ink clone, but there's no indication that was the case, and this is what leads to Himawari finally snapping. However, before we do Himawari's interaction here at the end of the chapter, let's just take a moment to realize the pain that both Ino and Sai, they're gonna be feeling right here. So Sai lost his brother in the training due to the method of Danzo's root organization, where you would be friends with somebody, you be comrades, you grow together, and then Danzo would say, hey, kill your best friend, the winner, you join the Anbu Black Ops. Though Sai's situation, there's some different circumstances that come with it that the Naruto war tells us, but Sai carried around that guilt. So you can only imagine what Sai losing his son would do to him. And when you transfer that over to Ino, it's even more heartbreaking. She lost her master to Hidan. She lost her father to Madara shooting off a Biju Dama via the Ten Tails. And now she seemingly lost her son to another Ten Tails. And because Ino is connected to Shikamaru and she's part of the sensory unit, Ino more than likely sensed her son's life force absolutely plummeting, and that is heartbreaking in of itself. And this is what truly makes Himawari in this moment so very special. Her hair, it begins to start flying upwards like Kushina's when she gets angry. The Kurama chakra, it is moving through her body. We don't have an aura or anything like that yet, but she has enough going through her body that she immediately shatters the wood release, and her eyes, it takes on the appearance that Naruto did when he would borrow some of Kurama's chakra. Her broken ankle now appears to be healed via the Jinchuriki healing factor. We end off the chapter with Kurama gassing up Himawari to go ahead and cut loose. Gaslighter Kurama, he ain't back all the way, but he's at least telling Himawari, here's my chakra, you are Naruto's daughter, so go show that Ten Tails that you are the daughter of the guy who saved the world 3 times already. So as we open up the chapter, we have Himawari emerging from the wood release jutsu that she was previously trapped in, and she lands on the ground. There's a huge thing of note with her appearance we have to take account of. So she's got the appearance of a Jinchuriki who's using Kurama's chakra, but her hair has been split up into 9 long extensions, very similar to the Nine Tails itself. Something we've never seen before out of the 3 prior Jinchuriki of Kurama, from Mito Uzumaki to Kushina Uzumaki in the Minato one-shot manga to Himawari's own father Naruto. And it's our first sign that what Kurama said about Himawari and himself being one body and one soul is what makes her different than all the others and gives her such a high affinity to use his power. Jura immediately takes note of her transformation, correctly guessing this is the power of the Nine Tails, and for someone such as him, who has been written as a rather philosophical character, constantly questioning the comings and goings of the existence in the Naruto world, he's now intrigued by what he sees from Himawari, and on some level, we're seeing what happens when the primal instincts meets the logical aspects of humanity. The primal instincts of Jura are telling him this girl that is standing in front of him is using the Nine Tails chakra, and yet at the same time, this is different than what should be what you see with a Jinchuriki, yet the human side of him is curious and he wants to know more, which is a very human thing to do. That insatiable thirst for knowledge and our capacity to process it is what makes us different from animals, and by extension, it's what makes Jura different from not just the Ten Tails that he was made from, but also even his awakened Shinju peers. This leads to Shikadai being used as a vehicle to tell us as the audience that Himawari is using the Nine Tails chakra at an advanced state because her leg was previously broken and now is completely healed, and we see Himawari being used as a bit of a contrast to Jura, whereas he had been shown being more human, pondering what it was going on with Himawari. We see Himawari just operating off a primal instinct. Without any effort, she just extends her hair like a nine-tailed fox would extend its tails, and she carefully removes the Nojin from the spike that has impaled him, sets him down, and begins to wrap his whole body in Nine-Tails chakra to begin rapidly healing his wounds in real time. And in the blink of an eye, Nojin Yamanaka, the newest member of the Donut Club, got his membership canceled because Himawari has closed up the wound that would have killed him had it stayed there any longer. It's at this point that Himawari says she doesn't know how she was able to do what she did, and that she's not sure if she's properly healed Inojin, which is why she orders Shikadai to take Inojin to the hospital and reveals her intention to stay behind to fight Jura alone. And in this moment here, there's a callback to two moments from Naruto's manga. Himawari not really understanding how she used her power, but doing so naturally. That is a callback to Naruto Volume 70, where Naruto healed Kakashi's eye and saved Might Guy without knowing what it was he was doing, and Himawari telling Team 10 to leave. That is a callback to the pain arc where Naruto in Volume 46 ordered everyone in Konoha to stay away from the battlefield, so to be blunt, they didn't get in his way. After Jura gives Shikadai a compliment, telling him that he was right to tell Chocho to listen to Himawari and flee from the battlefield before they get themselves killed, he praises Shikadai for his intelligence and vows to commit his name to memory, and says that they will meet again soon, which if you're Shikadai, you gotta be sweating a bit here, because Matsuri had more than one target revealed in chapter 5 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex. She chose Konohamaru for who she wanted to consume, but she also stated she could feel a strong attachment to the members of Team 10, directly named them as the Ino-Shikacho Trio. And now we have Jura here, someone who is already naturally curious, vowing to pay Shikadai a visit later on. And this leads to Chocho finally agreeing to leave, but only if Himawari promises to get pancakes, which that is a nice Easter egg to the Boruto Naruto Next Generation anime, where we learn that Himawari's favorite foods are pancakes and that Boruto makes them for her. What we're seeing here is more human emotions being put on display. Chocho is scared, not just for herself, but mainly for a friend, which is why she made Himawari promise her they'll get pancakes after the fact. It's a coping mechanism to give hope, because it allows the mind to feel at ease that they have a future plan, so surely that means Himawari won't lose. But the problem with that is that Himawari is going against Jura, someone who even Boruto didn't initially want to fight, particularly because it was a 4 versus 1 setting in chapter 4 of the manga, but the point still stands. Once Jura begins to start talking about the primal nature of humans to protect their comrades and the people that they view as being a part of their pack, as being part of their village, he wonders if by extension seeing Inojin almost die is what triggered this awakening in Himawari, and this is what finally causes Himawari to snap. With a single punch to the stomach, she hits Jura with enough force to shatter the ground just from the attack itself, and it's with another punch that we see Himawari send Jura flying. And this is where a rather interesting aspect of Himawari right now tends to get overlooked by the fandom, so I'm gonna shed some light onto the situation. The ground shattering from the force of her first attack, it is a sign that while she is using a high volume of chakra and she is picking up on using it very quickly, she is still very raw. She doesn't have the skill to contain the area damage from her attack. It's starting to spread out just with her first moves by themselves. By contrast, when you look at Naruto, someone who is more skilled in battle, more used to operating with that high volume of chakra, look at the battle with Delta in the Boruto manga. There was more control over the area damage as they went into their taijutsu barrage. The landscape, for the most part, it was not being altered by any of Naruto's attacks. When his punches landed, the shockwaves, they didn't crack the ground they were standing on. The area damage was contained to Delta. The most damage that he did outside of his super giant Rasengan that took down Delta was when he had to jump in the air and kick her into a chunk of the debris at the Hokage training ground. Even in Boruto chapter 52, when he was wielding that enormous power of Baryon mode, he kept the area damage limited only to his attacks. The only time he damaged the area was when he threw Ishiki's chakra cubes and once again when he had to kick Ishiki from the air and into the ground. Right now, Himawari, she has this enormous power inside of her, but she is literally learning to use it as she's fighting, and she's basically being used as Broly from the Dragon Ball Super movie, where Vegeta is astonished at how quickly Broly is adapting as they're fighting. Himawari's doing the same thing here. She's doing it off of pure instinct, and she's doing it now without Kurama's help. After Jura uses the momentum of her attack to fly upwards into the air, and he begins to rocket downwards towards Himawari, her hair begins to form around her body like tails do, in particular how Four Tails Naruto fired off his Bijudama at Orochimaru, and Himawari starts making her own Bijudama, which that is enough to make Jura halt his momentum and instead prepare to fire off his own Bijudama, and this leads to the two attacks colliding several hundreds of feet up in the air. It makes this massive shockwave that can be seen from afar, and it lets us know that had this attack been fired off when they were on the ground, they would have nuked the whole area. This rightfully fascinates Jura because of how rapidly she is beginning to advance, and this is enough to make Jura take the approach that, hey, equal rights means equal lefts. He blitzes Himawari and begins to go on the offensive by headbutting her, and before she can recover, he's already in the air above her, and he delivers a downward kick right to the back of her head that sends her face flying into the ground so hard it begins to split, in a sequence that was paneled as clear as day as homage to the recently deceased Akira Toriyama, the mangaka who brought us the Dragon Ball manga, who also heavily influenced Ikimoto. And we see Jura state that for the first time, he is curious about what it feels like to fight Himawari using full power. And that alone begins to start answering your question of, was Jura taking this fight serious up until now? And the answer was no, which it should be pretty obvious given 2 chapters ago, the guy was willingly letting himself be held captive by the Shadow Strangle Jutsu that Shikamaru used and allowed Chocho to use the expansion jutsu to knock him backwards. And upon hearing this reveal of Jura's intentions, Himawari begins to start coughing up blood, and we transition over to Sarada versus Hidari. Here we see Sarada beginning to take charge of the situation, trying to interrogate Hidari by first informing him of the severity of the damage her jutsu inflicted on him, but she also asks why is it that she can use her father's jutsu, and she wants to know what Hidari is. And this, my friends, is the moment where we got to start giving Boruto the collective side eye, because Sarada's words confirm what you've probably been suspecting. Boruto never told her that the awakened Shinju what they are, or that one of them looks like a darker skinned version of her father. The only thing she knows is that when people get bit by the claw grimes, they turn into a tree, but this part she doesn't know. All she knows right now is that this thing seemingly has Sasuke's chakra signature. He can use Code's jutsu. He also has the Rinnegan, and that's the extent of her knowledge. If she knew this info, she wouldn't have been caught off guard, which we can chalk that more so up to Boruto being interrupted by Mitsuki for their fight, so there's still some details Sarada didn't know. Hidari doesn't answer her question, but instead starts moving through the claw marks and comes out of one closer to Sarada, this time being fully healed, and Hidari reveals that Jura had previously told him about the Sharingan eyes, and Hidari had already pieced together he needs the Sharingan that Sarada possesses to properly use it. And this is where some of you guys might have confusion. You are probably going, hey, Madara and Orochimaru and Kabuto, they're some of the smartest guys in the series. They had this theory about the Rinnegan being the final evolved state of the Sharingan, but here's the thing, they are wrong. So not every Uchiha can awaken the Rinnegan. That's not possible. So that's why Obito didn't transform into a Rinnegan eye despite having Hashirama's chakra. It's as Hagoromo tells us in volume 70 of Naruto, you need to mix both Ashura and Indra's chakra together to get the Rinnegan, or you need to be directly given the eye by Hagoromo, as we learn in Naruto Databook 4, which is what he did to Sasuke. Hence Sasuke got his eye within moments instead of waiting 20 years like Madara. The awakened Shinju have a Rinnegan because they come from the Ten Tails, but the Rinnegan does not have any precognition powers of the Sharingan eye insight. Similar to how even though the Sharingan is an evolved mutation of the Byakugan, it can't see the chakra network, but it can see chakra as a color. The Rinnegan does not have precognition unless you have the Tomo in the eye like Sasuke did, which is why Hidari was hit by Sarada's previous Chidori, and this is where things start to heat up. As Konohamaru continues asking Hidari questions like what is he and how is he related to Sasuke, Class Rep is one that figures out Hidari's main target is Sarada, and she starts freaking out for Sarada's safety. And while that is impressive that she picked up on it so quickly, a huge testament to her perception it's also an example of the Japanese expression that the nail that sticks out, it gets hammered in, because Hidari has taken note of her, but right now she comes second to Sarada because Hidari notices that Sarada is looking at Class Rep out the corner of her eye, and if you go back to the prior panel where he says that's why he came to Konoha, his hand, in particular the one with the glove on it, it was at his side, yet while Sarada's attention is divided, his hand has now been moved to his pocket, which serves as a claw mark to move his hand behind Sarada and attack her with a lightning release jutsu while she is off guard. A ninja must see through deception, and in this very moment, Sarada is one who got deceived. Now, this is where I want to clear something up. So you might be going, wait a second, how did Sarada get tagged here? So let me explain. Sarada getting tagged here, it was brilliant writing when you look at what Hidari did in this moment. If you go back to when we first get to this scene and she's interrogating Hidari, there's no claw mark that is shown behind her when they're looking down at Hidari, yet Hidari attacked from behind. So when did he place that marker? How did he place that marker? It was a split second when Sarada, who doesn't have her Sharingan on, looks out the corner of her eye at Class Rep as Class Rep is speaking, saying Sarada's in danger, and Hidari, in that moment, he spawned a claw mark, which, as long as it's within the field of vision, it can be placed by anyone using code Shinjutsu, which is how he electrocuted Sarada before Class Rep could even continue speaking. That's how Sarada got caught off guard. This leads to her falling over in the tuning with Konohamaru. He attempts to step in, but he gets burned alive by a fire release jutsu before Sarada can fully fall to her knees, and Konohamaru steps in right away with a Rasengan, but now the situation, it is escalating. He rushes in with the Rasengan, and what we see here is that Hidari has taken in the awareness that the Chidori has a weakness, and so because he knows he's vulnerable for a counterattack, he teleports to the claw mark behind Konohamaru, grabs hold of his leg to stabilize him, and attempts to use Chidori. However, Konohamaru, being the grandson of the third Hokage, is no slouch, and so instead of trying to dodge the attack, Konohamaru turns around and uses a new wind release jutsu, which makes a vortex barrier, which applies wind release change in chakra nature, which is superior to lightning release chakra nature, and adds a change in chakra shape to reinforce it and make it stronger, and it's just strong enough to protect Konohamaru from the attack, but it sends him flying backwards and it knocks him out cold. This leads to Hidari teleporting behind Class Rep and hitting her with the same attack that knocks Sarada onto her knees, but due to Class Rep not having Sarada's durability, she crashes onto the ground unconscious. This, of course, transitions us back over to Himawari, who is getting the life beaten out of her by Jura, who at this point, he's just toying with her. He's firing off a mini Biju Dama at her side just to inflict damage so he can see how fast she regenerates, and this is where it gets very interesting. Jura says that despite having the high cost of the regeneration in terms of the chakra it requires, which is impressive on her side, he states that she is just like he and the other awakened Shinju. Himawari is more than a human, and she's something more than a Jinchuriki, which is what we've been saying over here on the channel, and it goes back to why she has a higher affinity than Naruto. She was born with a small seed of the Nine Tails because her father was a Nine Tails Jinchuriki, and we, up until this point in the timeline, have never seen a male Jinchuriki have children. And when Kurama died using burial mode, that chakra of Kurama transmigrated over to Himawari, but Kurama begins to freak out because despite her natural talent, Jura is just being blunt, too strong for her to deal with, and this is where the stakes raise even higher. That flying nuclear weapon known as Kawaki has just got another reason to dislike Boruto, because Delta's asking quite out loud. She's going, hey, what are you gonna do against someone who is just that much stronger than you, has already whooped your ass before? And within seconds, a black blur, it streaks past them at high speeds, and Kawaki realizes this is Boruto, and this just speaks at the alarming rate of Boruto's growth. The guy in the last day has fought 3 battles back to back, was further away from the area than Kawaki, actively trying to suppress Momoshiki from emerging, and despite Kawaki getting a head start towards Himawari, Boruto just blitzes past them, arrives at the battlefield to save Himawari before Kawaki can even get there. The timing of this is really intentional by the narrator. So here's the thing, Kawaki was just verbally reminded by Delta that he is outclassed, and now he's seeing another of his targets he wants to kill, Boruto, just casually fly past him at speeds he can't keep up with, and that is a physical reminder that Kawaki is outside his weight class for this fight, and it's just another layer to the eventual explosion known as the Otsuki nuclear weapon that goes by the name Kawaki Uzumaki. But this isn't going to go over very well with them, especially since Boruto, he's on pace right now to save the village twice in 24 hours. Meanwhile, as Boruto begins to take flight holding Himawari, Sarada has now been pinned down by Hidari, who has transformed his hand into a tree branch, and he is in the process of beginning to devour her, similar to how Jura was going to do to Himawari in the last chapter, trapping her in her tree. But Sarada catches sight of the toad that's sitting on the light post, is holding Boruto's flying Raijin marker, and the toad inside of Boruto's cloak relays the situation of Sarada, and Boruto teleports right away using the flying Raijin and begins to draw his sword with a pissed off expression on his face. And he takes his free hand, he cuts Sarada free of the attack, and this moment right here is huge. Boruto had to save Sarada, and I'll explain why. This isn't, oh my god, damsel in distress. Let me tell you what you're missing. So Boruto, he needed this moment. In chapter 5, he was too weak and he was too unskilled to fight alongside his master Sasuke in his final moments. His sword was broken and he had to run away in shame, and he was left with the words of Sasuke where Boruto had to promise him that he would look after Sarada for Sasuke, and Boruto saving Sarada in this moment from the same fate of her father is meant to right the wrong of what happened in the past with Sasuke 2 years ago. He failed her father, but he's not going to fail her. It's a super poetic moment, and the chapter ends off with Jura being annoyed at Boruto once again, swooping in and teleporting away, and Hidari refers to Boruto as Boruto Sasuke, setting the stage for the upcoming battle. Now, obviously, this is a big moment for Boruto because he saves Sarada and he also manages to save his sister Himawari after she got into a battle where she was in a little bit too far over her head, even though she did well. And so now Boruto gets the opportunity to start repaying back the people in Sarada and Himawari who had the most faith in him. But given the scare that he had earlier, where he's looking over at his hand, trying to contain Momoshiki, Boruto has to monitor his chakra levels now, and this will not be an easy fight. So we pick up where the last chapter left off, and Boruto, he saves Sarada and he's staring down Hidari in the most brutal of fashions, and he is completely pissed off right now. He's got his sword in one hand, and in the other he's got the unconscious body of his younger sister Himawari, and he's got his body positioned protectively between Sarada and Hidari. After the last 3 years where he's had his parents sealed away by Kawaki, he's had his life stolen at the hands of Kawaki, and he's lost his sensei, Boruto is done taking any more losses, and the aura surrounding Boruto right now, it has changed. This is Boruto ready to finally stop holding back because the threat level is too great to approach all the fights that are ahead of him with a restrained manner like we've seen him do previously. After Boruto sets down Himawari, ordering Konoha to watch over her, Hidari goes right in for the kill by trying to cut Boruto's head off, but Boruto, being the swift guy that he is, has already begun moving to block using his sword to stop the attack, and while Hidari is focused on the attack, Boruto's wasting no time and is using one-handed hand seals as he's got one hand on his sheath, and this is a pretty big deal because as we're told in Naruto's manga, only the most elite of the most elite shinobi are capable of using one-handed seals, putting Boruto in that rare class of skill with people like Minato, Naruto, Sasuke, and Itachi. But he's also using a very powerful wind release jutsu that was Orochimaru's signature wind release, the wind release breakthrough jutsu, which uses more force than the Gale Palm jutsu, but it requires less hand seals for the chakra to be summoned. With this one move, Boruto has now pushed Hidari through the air and away from the battle, further away from the people that Boruto has to protect. However, like one would expect from someone who's made out of the chakra Sasuke Uchiha, Hidari isn't taken out with a simple wind release, and before he ever hits the ground, he is shown using his toes to make the claw mark in order to teleport through it and retreat and regather himself, and this is where it gets very interesting. While everyone else is stunned, Boruto is shown taking in the situation, and he's breaking down Hidari's application of Ko's Claw Mark Jutsu while keeping his sword at the ready to be drawn, and while technically this is the right move for Hidari, it also was an error because Boruto is in that small list of shinobi who have genius level perception, and they only need to see how you use a jutsu once or twice before they begin to start making counter strategies in order to bring you down. For every second that that Hidari is in retreat, he's given Boruto the time to calmly process what it is he's seen. Meanwhile, Kawaki and Delta are now at the location where Team 10 were reported to have been in battle, and Delta ends up being the one who clocks Jura's location before Kawaki, and Kawaki is left admitting that Boruto in possession of a space-time jutsu that moves this fast instantaneously, it is a problem. Delta takes the time to ask the sensory unit the most important question, which is, where are the members of Team 10 that they were sent to assist as backup? And when you think about it, she's got a really good reason to be concerned for their safety. The members of Team 10, while they aren't weak in any definition of the word, they might be lacking when compared to the current threats, but to different degrees. Each of them has surpassed their parents when their parents were the same age, and in the case of someone like Chocho, she surpassed her father from the war. But those levels of power, they are nothing to a threat level like Jura, and Delta definitely knows it. The only thing left standing where Team 10 should be is Jura, and she's basically asking for clarity here. Were the members of Team 10, were they wiped out? And the sensory unit gives her the update that they are currently safe. They're headed back to the village, and that Boruto has appeared with Himawari, and they have joined up with Sarada's location. What's crazy about all this is that Jura is just so unserious right now. He's completely unbothered by the situation. He is standing there with his hands in his pockets. He's not concerned with Kawaki or Delta, and he doesn't really have a reason to be upset or concerned. He already knocked Kawaki unconscious once before. What's Kawaki gonna do in a rematch this soon? This is something that even Kawaki himself knows, because he doesn't ever make the attempt to charge Jura. He just stands there in the sky brooding, watching as Jura is taking in the scenery, and he's trying to figure out what is Jura's next move. While it is very smart on Kawaki's end, not rushing to fight someone who is that much stronger than him, it's also telling that someone as quick-tempered as him isn't flying in there blindly, because he still remembers that ass whooping he got from a few chapters ago. We then transition back to Boruto's situation, and things, they had gotten pretty tense very quickly over there. Konohamaru, once he sees Hidari is gone, is laying into Boruto, telling him that his position hasn't really changed and that Boruto keeps coming to and from the village like nothing has happened 3 years ago. And that's our reminder that, once again, omnipotence, it is still an issue for Boruto to deal with. His good deeds, they don't change the fact that everyone's memories outside of himself, Kawaki, Ada, Damon, Sarada, and Class Rep, they have all been altered. The belief is that Boruto is the adopted son of Naruto who killed Naruto and Hinata, and that Kawaki is the innocent son of Naruto. Just being told the truth, it does not reverse this. Their memories, they will forever stay altered. The only thing they can do is, as Sasuke and Shikamaru have done, trust the information told to them and ignore their memories. It's a tragic reminder that Boruto, for as heroic as he is still seen as the villain in the eyes of Konoha. This leads to Sarada telling Konohamaru once again that he is wrong about Boruto, and for the first time we see Konohamaru silent as he's digesting her words and what his eyes are showing him before he informs Boruto of how Hidari's fighting style is similar to Code, but Boruto's already one step ahead. The time that he spent thinking to himself, he's already thought of a way to combat Hidari, and he tells Nishi to use his sensory skills as a ninja to monitor the claw marks, and he walks him through exactly what he needs to do, and we once again see omnipotence on full display. Nishi is pushing back against Boruto, saying, "Who are you to give me orders?" Because in his mind, Boruto's the guy who killed the 7th Hokage. Boruto, he can't win for losing here, but he doesn't have time to go back and forth with Nishi. Instead, he's being brought up to speed by Class Rep and Sarada, who tell him that Sarada was the target of Hidari, and Sarada demands to know if her being the target of Hidari and him using Sasuke's jutsu has anything to do with Sasuke being turned into a tree. And before Boruto can answer the question that Sarada clearly already knows in her heart, Konohamaru is the one who interjects, realizing exactly what this means. The tree that he saw Moegi was trapped in back in chapter 5, where he and the members of Team 10, they all vowed to take down who was responsible. He now realizes that Moegi has suffered the same fate of Sasuke, that there's an awakened Shinju version of her out there as well. It's here that Boruto lays it out on the table for everyone, including us as the readers, that each of these Shinju, they were directly born of the chakra of the person who they consumed. And with a serious look on his face, Boruto says the only way to save Sasuke is to defeat Hidari. Something that, as we've been going through the story, looked more and more evident like that would be the case, but now we have official confirmation that this is indeed true. And Konohamaru asks Boruto, how does he know all this information? And Boruto refuses to answer, instead redirecting Konohamaru back to being focused because his guard is too lowered and that he can get himself killed. And this right here, my friends, is completely ironic. One of the lessons that Boruto consistently had to learn over and over in part 1 of the story was to never let his guard down. Sasuke taught him that when Boruto Boruto tried to approach him when he tried to make Sasuke his teacher. Shojoji remind him of that when he caught Boruto off guard during their fight. Naruto, both times they sparred with each other in part 1, reminded Boruto to watch his blind side, and Konoha during the owl fight was almost killed by a laser by pushing Boruto out the way because Boruto had his guard lowered. Here, the tables have turned. The sensei is now the student here. Boruto is now the one who is reminding Konoha to keep his guard up before he gets himself killed. And this doesn't come a moment too soon. Nishi suddenly begins to start freaking out as he senses the chakra coming from the claw marks, and Boruto, as calm as he is, looks over at the corner of his eye and he tells Nishi to keep his nerves about him, and he's already clocked the emergence of one of the claw marks at his feet. However, it isn't just Hidari who's coming out of the claw marks. Instead, it is a whole team of claw marks, and Boruto has immediately figured out what Hidari's plan is, and he begins giving the orders with the assessment and the clarity of someone who has seen extensive life and death battle, which in the case of Boruto, the last 3 years has been exactly that. He tells Sarada, don't worry about the claw grimes. He will go through and cut down the ones that he can, but he just needs her to be on the lookout for Hidari. Instead of trying to help him fight, she needs to only worry about the claw grimes that are approaching her. And it's basically Boruto saying to Sarada, Hidari is trying to use numbers and the element of surprise to get us to react. If you focus on battling and fighting blindly, he's gonna blindside you when you least expect it, which you would have to think that is a tactic that Code used in the flashback of chapter 5 when Code was battling Boruto and Sasuke off screen. This leads to Konoha telling class rep, go ahead and stand back and stay away from the battlefield, basically saying this fight is above your weight class, which that's the right call to make. Class rep in part 1 of the story was not a combatant. In a situation like this, if you can't pull your own weight, you just become a burden to others. Time that they spend worrying about you is time that they could have been spending making sure that the enemy is defeated. It's here that we see Boruto quickly draw his sword and begin to start hacking away at the claw grimes while watching the belts on their bodies, because he knows at any moment more of them can emerge, and even Hidari can emerge if he chooses to. The trauma from that battle with Sasuke, something that he has likely spent the last 3 years replaying that entire fight over and over in his head every night before he goes to sleep, is aiding him right here in this battle where he's fighting alongside Sasuke's daughter, taking his chance to right the wrong of his failure to be there to save Sasuke in chapter 5, but he couldn't do so because of his lack of skill and strength. This is a much more evolved Boruto than that one. To Sarada's credit though, she's already fought against some of the claw grinds before. She knows their strength and she knows their fighting patterns, so as she's fighting them, she doesn't have her Sharingan on, meaning she at the very least thinks that their movements aren't anything that she needs to use a Sharingan Eye Insight for with the precognition, and she doesn't think she needs to waste the Sharingan because of the chakra that it requires to use. This can also be attributed to the fact that Boruto is right there to cover her blind side. However, this is very tricky and it is a risky gamble, all things considered. When you think about it, if you go back to part 1 of Naruto or even part 2 of Naruto, someone like Itachi, even for all the stamina issues he had, whenever there was an active threat on the battlefield, he left nothing to chance and he kept his Sharingan cut on the entire time. What we're seeing here is that for as talented as Sarada is, she is still the byproduct of someone who spent most of her life growing up in a time of peace, which that's no fault of her own. And again, to her defense, she doesn't need it against this enemy, but it is a very risky decision, and as expected, it's one that bites her almost literally right there on the spot. Hidari has reached his hand through the belts on the stomach of the claw grime that she's fighting, that she's attempting to kick away, and he's pulling himself through it with the intention to devour her, something that could have been prevented now that we know for certainty how the claw marks work and what one of the weaknesses is, which is that when someone emerges through the claw marks themselves, their chakra can be sensed in that split second, which means that someone who has a Sharingan like Sarada, on top of having the precognition, which is now even more advanced due to her having awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, even if she's only using the 3 Tomo, the effects of the Sharingan precognition and Sharingan Genjutsu are amped up in the 3 Tomo because you've awakened the Mangekyo. She would have been able to see the chakra Hidari emerging through the belt firsthand because the Sharingan can see chakra as a color. However, Boruto's already one step ahead, and so he's thrown the shuriken that has been marked with his flying Raijin seal right into the neck of one of the claw grimes that Hidari is emerging from, and he's got his hand in position to make a Rasengan instantaneously. And this, my friends, is Boruto taking a page out of his grandfather's book by slamming a Rasengan into Hidari's back the same way that Minato did to Obito in volume 53 of the Naruto manga. Whereas Minato used the flying Raijin stage 2 for a faster version due to Kamui, Boruto just uses the basic teleportation and he slams a high-powered Rasengan into Hidari, which destroys his arm before he can begin to start consuming Sarada. This of course leads to Hidari once again retreating and going back into the Ten Tails dimension so he can recover and reconsider his course of action, rethink his plan. And what's interesting is that when Hidari is finished recovering and he's now appearing in the claw marks right behind Boruto and Sarada, we get the reveal of what his special Rinnegan power is. So using his Rinnegan, he can produce as many claw marks as he wants, which that makes it much more difficult to fight him. And it explains how the claw mark that got behind Sarada in chapter 11 was suddenly there when previously it had not been behind her. It's because he used his Rinnegan power. It's Hidari's Rinnegan power, and Sarada, she tried to come up with a plan to use Boruto's ability to fly, thinking that if Boruto is in the sky, he can see where Hidari is going to emerge from, and Boruto can just fly down and slam a Rasengan into him. And to a certain degree, it makes sense. However, Boruto shoots it down for two primary reasons. Number one, Hidari can't fly. There's no need for Boruto to take to the air. And then number two, the unspoken reason is that Boruto, he's not going to do something as risky to use Sarada as bait. He is still very much protective of her because of Sasuke's request that Boruto protect Sarada. Even if it means just a few seconds, Boruto's not going to allow that. The moment that Hidari was on her, he didn't hesitate to teleport directly to her. So if he's in the air, it's going to take longer to just fly down. And if he uses the flying Raijin to teleport to her, assuming she's holding a marker, he's just wasting his chakra. Instead, Boruto gets right down to business by saying he's seen enough with Hidari, and so he's going to use a full version of the Rasengan Uzehiko to kill Hidari in one blow. That way, they don't have to worry about the claw marks. And so Boruto explains to her how this jutsu uses the chakra of the planet and the rotation of the planet to amp up the Rasengan, revealing that the jutsu doesn't have a limit to how strong it can become. One interesting thing there is that Boruto reveals some information that we previously did not know about this jutsu, which is that the use of the Rasengan Uzehiko requires him to draw on the chakra of the planet through his feet. So he's got to remain stationary on the ground, so he cannot fly. But also he doesn't need to fly due to the fact that Hidari can't fly either, which for someone like Jura and Kawaki, people who can fly, Boruto has just revealed a major weakness to the Uzehiko. The time that he needs to gather the maximum output and the fact that he needs to stay grounded, those are weaknesses that can be exploited by people who can fly. And it's just as Itachi told Naruto in the war. Every jutsu has a weakness. You just have to remain calm and keep your eyes open, that way you see the weakness when it presents itself. This leads to Konoha stepping in to use his wind release Rasen barrier jutsu to stop Hidari from landing a Chidori on Boruto from behind, and we see once again more lessons from Naruto Part 1, which is that your special moves and your combo moves, you better not use them too often in a fight. When you use them, they better take down the enemy, because if your enemy survives, they will come up with a counter. Perfect example being how Zabuza only needed one fight with Kakashi and his Sharingan to come up with a way to fight it. Konoha now has figured out a way to battle Hidari because he knows the guy likes to emerge from the claw marks that come from the blind side and use the Chidori without fully emerging. So Konoha steps in with the wind release Rasen barrier jutsu in order to protect Boruto's blind side, all while Boruto gathers his chakra, and Konoha tells Boruto to hurry up and get the chakra he needs for his jutsu. However, as Boruto and Konoha are going back and forth about Boruto using this new jutsu and Konoha not listening to Boruto about his demands to protect Himawari, Hidari has taken advantage and he's emerged and he has grabbed Sarada from behind, and so now he's attempting to make the play of just dragging her through the claw marks and consume her in the Ten Tails dimension. That's the smart play, since he can't win this fight because he's outnumbered. But like Konohamaru, Sarada, she's caught on to Hidari's methods, and so this time she is prepared. She quickly weaves the hand signs for the Chidori stream, and she shocks Hidari until he releases her, which is our sign that she has continued the lightning release training that Sasuke worked with her on part 1 of the story, because she has now pulled out one of Sasuke's signature Chidori variants. She then follows up with her element of surprise by using her superhuman strength that she gets from her mother by hurling Hidari towards Boruto, and she tells Boruto, use that jutsu you were just bragging about. And what we're seeing here is that Sarada has used the information Boruto gave her to put this whole plan into play. Hidari is basically too high up to use the claw marks to escape, and he can't fly like Jura or Boruto or Kawaki, and so Boruto at this point unleashes the Rasengan Uzahiko at max output, even though it's not fully complete. The jutsu has not gathered all the chakra, and this is where you have to sit down for a moment. Boruto wasn't lying when he told Code that killing Code would be easy. He nearly still killed the guy while holding back, and with this new jutsu that's more amped up than the first time we saw it, the spiral that Boruto creates, it isn't just limited to the surface of Hidari's body. Instead, it stretches up high into the air like a self-contained tornado. The wind damage is only limited to Hidari himself and none of the other stuff in the area. Think of it like Hidari has been trapped into an EF5 tornado, only the tornado doesn't destroy the area, it just destroys Hidari's body. And this is where we see that a majority of Hidari's body has been vaporized by the attack, with only part of his shoulder, part of his arm, and his head still left behind. But it's too early to celebrate because Boruto sees the way that Hidari is falling to the ground, and he realizes Hidari is going to fall right onto a claw mark and escape. And that defeats the whole purpose of using such a high level move like this, because the intention was to defeat the enemy with one shot. But this is where Kawaki comes in clutch. After Kawaki appears and instantaneously shrinks all the claw marks, he pins down Hidari by transforming his arm into that wood release ninja tech appendage that Kawaki uses, and he quickly fires off a chakra blast to destroy Hidari right on the spot. And this, my friends, is Kawaki acting like that one party member in a role-playing game where they just swoop in at the last minute to dish out the final blow and take the bulk of the experience points for the battle and get whatever rare item that the boss dropped that the person who beats them gets, which in this case it's a rare item that is a chakra fruit, but it has spikes on it and it has a Rinnegan, and for an now unexplained reason it flies into Boruto's hand, and Boruto immediately shows it to the toad that's hidden inside of his collar, and Kashin Koji reveals that this is the item that they've been looking for. It's called the Thorn Soul, but the Thorn Soul, what it is, the story doesn't tell us right now just yet. We have to wait a little bit longer. The only thing that you know as of this moment is that the Thorn Soul can be used to save Sasuke, who's now been turned into a tree, which also by extension can save the other people who've been turned into awakened Shinju. But then out of nowhere, Kawaki suddenly grabs Boruto by the collar and he's threatening him and he's demanding to know how Boruto knows all this information. And Boruto then tells Kawaki to release him, saying he'll pull a Sasuke and he'll cut his arm off the way that Sasuke did when he was interrogating Yamato, and Kawaki burst in the room and Sasuke said, you want to be like Naruto, you can lose an arm like Naruto. However, Boruto never gets the chance to make good on this promise because suddenly a Bijudama bullet, a compressed down Bijudama the size of a bullet, is shot out from a long distance that hits Boruto in the vital spots, and as Boruto is falling onto the ground and he's coughing up blood, Sarada is rushing forward to collect the Thorn Soul that will be needed to save her father. Kawaki demands the Delta to check in with them, tell him what's going on, and we see that Jura is several miles outside the village with one Rinnegan eye closed, and he is preparing to fire off another Bijudama bullet into the village, which is absolutely crazy. Jura is just casually sniping from that long of a distance, which is another sign that Jura is special when it comes to Shinju, and even Delta is shocked at the accuracy at which Jura can shoot. And when Sarada tries to run forward and grab the Thorn Soul so she can save her father, Sarada gets shot right there in the arm and she is taken out of the fight. This leads to the Thorn Soul being summoned by Jura, and Jura utters the same words that Jigen did to Sasuke when they fought, which is where he said the most dangerous between Naruto and Sasuke was Sasuke. Jura declares Boruto the more dangerous between Boruto and Kawaki because of his knowledge of the Thorn Soul, and says that he has to kill Boruto and that Kawaki is good enough to be used as bait to produce a chakra fruit, where he isn't wrong here. Kawaki is 100% Otsutsuki now. He is as good as anything to be fed to a Ten Tails, but prior to this, Jura had no intention of going after Kawaki, but now he's got no choice. Boruto in the last 3 years has learned way too much, which leads to Jura preparing to make his next move. And this, my friends, is where things get even darker, because now Boruto, for the first time since becoming a rogue ninja and returning to Konoha, stands a very good chance at dying. But obviously Boruto's story's not over yet. With Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 15, we take the story in a direction that no Naruto fan ever thought we'd go, which is into the multiverse, but it's not full-blown in the way that you might see with Marvel Studios, where characters are literally traveling the multiverse itself. Instead, the concept of alternate timelines, it has been introduced, and what it shows is that in nearly every timeline, if things don't go exactly the right way, 95% of the time, the villain wins. However, we'll touch on how Kashin Koji was doing his best Doctor Strange impression a bit later on, because the concept of alternate timelines, it seems to have a lot of people confused. So for now, let's unpack the chapter itself. So we open up where the last chapter left off. Jura is surveying his work from afar, watching as Boruto is fighting to stay conscious after that off-guard Bijudama sniper bullet, and he's lamenting the fact that he's now gonna have to kill Boruto, preparing to fire off another Bijudama at him, this time likely aiming for the head. But before you can do so, we have Bug pop out of Jura's body, and the story manages to subvert expectations in a good way. Going into this, you got the villain with a lethal and long-range set of attacks. He's got the high ground by being in the sky, and so he's got the advantage. If he wanted to kill Boruto, he could, and he was going to kill him. The narrative made you want to believe there's intense action coming, which is why dropping Bug in right here to troll the readers via the subversion expectations is the right thing to do. The benefit to this is that Bug has dropped a lot of new lore on us by revealing that they're now ready for their plan back at the Ten Tails dimension using the black cube that we saw in the last chapter, and Bug states the obvious, that Boruto clearly has someone helping him, which is our first sign of a couple of signs that Kashin Koji, his seat is beginning to grow warmer by the minute, and just as toads and hot water don't mix, Kashin Koji is slowly being heated up to get forced out of hiding at a later point in the story. This leads to Jura and Bug discussing the Thorn Soul, the possibility that Boruto has an ally who told him about it, and they discuss the death of Hidari. What we see next is what makes Jura so dangerous. He stops charging the Bijudama bullet in his Rinnegan and wisely chooses to retreat. While he has Boruto on the edge, he's vulnerable. Killing him might be the smart option. The unknown factor of who is helping Boruto, the possibility that it might be something of a divine intervention at work. It's why Jura is wise to pull back here. There's an unknown variable at play here that he cannot afford to make a move without knowing, even against someone like Boruto that he deems to be dangerous until he has all the information, which is likely something that he read in all those various books he read. Some of them are likely strategy books like the Naruto universe's version of the 48 Laws of Power, which we'll just say that's going to be the 48 Laws of 10-10. So law number 40 of the 48 Laws of Power discusses being wary of the offer of a free lunch, saying that both things given for free and things that seem too good to be true are things you should be afraid of, because there might be strings attached to them or unintended consequences for taking what might seem to be the easier route. Jura has now run into an unknown variable, and he correctly decides to retreat, prioritizing the resurrection of Hidari's Thorn Soul before making another move and gather more intel on a possible divine presence helping Boruto. This leads us to the flashback where we see the 13-year-old Boruto living his life as a rogue ninja following Sasuke's heartbreaking defeat by Code in chapter 5, and we see how much harder things have gotten for Boruto now that Sasuke isn't there to help him. He's deep in what appears to be the Stone Village, and he is struggling to catch his breath as he's hiding, and this is our reminder of just how messed up a situation Boruto's in. He doesn't just have Code looking for him during the time skip, he also has all 5 nations carrying out a manhunt, because Kawaki framed him for the murder of Naruto, and killing someone like Naruto, that's not the same as just killing any regular Kage. So like say killing the current Tsuchikage. Nobody's going to care for the most part if she dies. There'll be people upset, but it won't be on this level. When you kill someone like Naruto, you've essentially killed hope itself for the world, which is why the presence of the Stone Village ninja that are hunting down Boruto was so important to see. Up until this point, everything we've seen has been very Konoha-centric, centric. This shows you the death of Naruto. It is spread out throughout the ninja world itself. During this time, there's no safe place, and Boruto's now alone, which means there is no Sasuke to take turns on shifts while the other one sleeps. That night where you lay down your head to catch a few hours of sleep, it might be your last time closing your eyes if the wrong person happens to find you. Boruto likely has a bounty on his head. That's what makes the arrival of Kashin Koji's toad feel so much of a relief for Boruto. He finally isn't alone anymore, even though he is apprehensive of seeing the toad. And the toad even tells him that Boruto shouldn't be scared of him, because if he was working with the enemy, he would have told the 20 Stone Village ninja gathered to kill Boruto exactly where he was. And he gives Boruto a proposition. You can stay here, you can fight these shinobi, you'll likely be forced to kill some of them, or you can go away with me. And Boruto knows his hand is forced. He has no other options. And so he grabs hold of the toad, and he is reverse summoned by Kashin Koji. Though Boruto doesn't immediately recognize him, Kashin Koji tells Boruto they're currently in Orochimaru's hideout, just outside the Land of Wind, which, wow, talk about a switcheroo here. All the intel the Shinobi Alliance had about Boruto was that he was in the Land of Earth itself. Now he's in the Land of Wind, in one of Orochimaru's hideouts just outside the Land of Wind, so he is now south of his last location, hundreds of miles away. Kashin Koji reveals that he's taken extra precautions by hiding the entrances to the hideout via genjutsu, once again showing us his superiority over his original Jiraiya, since Jiraiya, his clone parent, sucked at genjutsu by his own admission. Way back in the Pain arc, when the toads tell him, hey, you need to use genjutsu on the 6 paths of pain, and Jiraiya says, I suck at genjutsu. But this clone here is able to pull off all of this very easily. When Boruto asks Kashin Koji who he is, Koji takes out the remaining part of his mask that was not destroyed by Ishiki, and when Boruto sees it as he puts it to his face, he recognizes it's Kashin Koji, which it should be worth noting since there is some confusion here. Boruto never saw Koji unmasked, which is another example of dramatic irony. We know what Kashin Koji looks like without the mask, but Boruto never saw it because Amado's feed that was showing everyone that battle, it cut off before Naruto and company could see Kashin Koji get unmasked by Ishiki. Koji introduces himself as a synthetic human because he was a cyborg clone of Jiraiya that was made by Amado, basically a human clone who had his body mechanically enhanced by Amado's ninja tech, and this leads to Kashin Koji purposely prodding Boruto for information, asking him if he was truly born into this world as Naruto Uzumaki's child. And Boruto immediately grows suspicious because Boruto knows how omnipotence works. Everyone should have had their memories of Boruto and Kawaki reversed, and even someone as smart as Sasuke, a literal genius, a generational talent, even he was not able to fully see through omnipotence. Even after Ada and Boruto told him the truth, even after he senses Momoshiki and Boruto, Sasuke still had his doubts, but he chose to ignore his memories and believe in his daughter Sarada instead, which, as we all know, drove Momoshiki crazy because it is illogical. In Boruto's experience, normal people, they don't take too well to omnipotence, and so now his guard, it is up as he is answering Kashin Koji's answer with a non-answer, a true shinobi move to make. He doesn't confirm or deny he is Naruto's son, but just by asking if Kashin Koji knows what omnipotence is, that is enough for Kashin Koji to get the answer he is looking for. This one dialogue here is just dripping with ninja trickery, seen through deception. Very brilliant writing here. So Kashin Koji then reveals to us that his memories, like everyone else's, they have been swapped around. In his mind, the cyborg child that Gaara raised to be Ishiki's vessel, that was Boruto. Yet he knows that his memory, it is lying to him, that it wasn't Boruto, but instead it was Kawaki. He concedes he doesn't know much about omnipotence, but he understands the general concept of it. Boruto and Kawaki, they switch lives, and as a video game achievement award pops up for Boruto saying he's gained a new ally slash party member, Boruto narrows his eyes because, as you would expect from the student of Sasuke and the grandson of Minato, he's already cautiously poking holes in what Kashin Koji said just to be safe. As we just went over, most people, they can't see past their memories. Most people will ignore their lying eyes and go off of what they remember. Yet somehow Kashin Koji was able to recognize what it was that was going on, and he's acting accordingly despite never being told what omnipotence is by anyone. Boruto's making sure this isn't a trap because you have to remember, as his last memory of Kashin Koji is, he was someone working with Amado, and Amado is now an ally of Konoha. So Boruto has to be cautious, but thankfully for Boruto, Kashin Koji is not working with Amado right now. Koji states that he knew what would happen when omnipotence was casted in advance, which is how he knew what was going on, but he also tells Boruto he regrets having to fight Boruto on the day that he almost killed Konohamaru, but that was his mission as someone who's playing the role of a double agent, working to kill Jigen and then try to kill Ishiki afterwards. And this is where the narrative begins to start weighing you down on your heart, and you see just how much the last year of Boruto's life it has taken a toll on him, and you see some of Boruto's character development through the suffering he's gone through. He tells Kashin Koji he doesn't begrudge him because he knows how frustrating missions can be, how much of a weight they can carry on his shoulders, and that he's currently struggling with it himself. And as we as readers know, it's for a really good reason. The night the Omnipotence was casted, it changed Boruto's life forever. His parents, they were sealed away. His friend Sarada was almost killed by Kawaki. His life with Kawaki was switched in everyone's minds. The world is now hunting him down for the murder of Naruto. Momoshiki was activating his karma seal to slaughter his friends before Sasuke saved him to prevent that from happening. And a year later, his sensei, his last ray of hope, it was defeated by one of the many people hunting down Boruto. He endured enough that it would break most people, and yet he has no choice but to endure it. Kashin Koji pauses for a moment before answering the question that readers have had on their minds for the last 4 years, which is, how did Kashin Koji survive the battle with Ishiki? Just as Naruto thought, Koji was fighting Jigen with everything he had. He was fighting Ishiki with an intense desperation to live, believing he could win, yet it was futile. And as he lay there waiting for death, trusting that Naruto could finish the job that he failed, he finally awakened a new power that was inside of him. And this is where the lore gets really deep and a lot richer. And all 4 of Amado's remaining defenders, they should be thinking about waving the white flag, because this makes Amado look even more sus. His sussy Baka stocks, they are now going through the roof right now. Koji, as he was on his deathbed, he sees a film tape that appears in front of him, and he sees the future play out right before his very eyes. The battle of Barrel Mode Naruto versus Ishiki, Momoshiki versus Kawaki with this reawakened karma seal, Code and Ada joining forces. He is getting a huge info dump in real time that shows him the end of Boruto Part 1, but also events that we have not seen transpire yet into Blue Vortex, like Gaara's son Shinki being turned into an awakened Shinju, which we know that Shinki, based on the black lines on his cheek as well as the black lines that are around his eyes, Kashin Koji has seen a divine tree produce and a chakra fruit, and it's in that moment his resolve to live, it kicks in, because he knows even if Naruto manages to kill Ishiki, Ishiki will still win in the end. This is what led to Koji to summoning the Toad and reverse summoning himself, because he now has a chance to change the future of what he saw, paying off what Ishiki told him when he unmasked him as being Jiraiya's clone. He said that Koji, like the person he was cloned after, was born under a star of change, and that Amado was betting on Koji having a possibility of changing destiny in the way that Jiraiya did when he died fighting pain, where the decision that Jiraiya made, as the Toad Sage told him, would affect the path that his student he raised would take the world down, which, as we all know, that child of prophecy ended up being Naruto. Though you could twist it a bit and say Naruto and Nagato were both the child of prophecy, the point still stands. This leads to Kashin Koji taking the time to analyze his abilities as he was hiding, comparing it with reality, and basically self-teaching himself. And that's where he came to the conclusion of what happened and what was behind it, and all roads, they lead back to Amado's Sanzu. Amado was withholding information from Naruto in chapter 74 and chapter 75. Despite Naruto telling Amado, stop withholding information, this is your last chance, Amado was continuing to play on that naive nature of Naruto that still exists as Hokage, and in typical gaslighter behavior straight out the school of Makima, Amado crafted a lie that was mixed in with the truth, and it played on Naruto's sympathies, also he could hide information from him. He told Naruto that he transplanted into several cyborgs Shibai Otsutsuki's DNA, the Otsutsuki who became a god and mastered every shinjutsu in existence. However, the way that he framed his words, he made it seem like the only people who he gave Shibai's DNA to were Ada, Damon, and Code via the Senrigan, Reflection, and the claw marks respectively. The issue is, though, this wasn't the only case here. All of the car inners are cyborgs who Amado used ninja tech to mechanically enhance their bodies, and that ninja tech all had Shibai's DNA in it as a binding agent. The goal wasn't just for a power boost, but it was also to have them awaken the Shinjutsu of Shibai, but it was hit or miss. Koji says that it was largely dependent on a lot of luck. Hence himself, Delta, and Boro, they never awakened Shinjutsu, but in the case of Koji, it was awakened when he was on the brink of death. As you recall, after Amado doesn't tell them that Delta possesses Shibai's DNA, he switches gears by conveniently talking about his dead daughter, knowing that Ada would be able to confirm it, and he deflected the entire conversation away from Shibai by playing on the emotion card. You have to remember that at this point in the timeline, only a few days prior, Naruto just saw his kid killed in front of him. He held the dead body of his firstborn child, and it was only through an act of God by Momoshiki that Boruto was still alive. He manipulated the conversation away from all of this in order to further stop any more questions about Shibai, and it looks like it's by design, given that Kashin Koji's ability of future sight was something that Amado conveniently left out when discussing Shinjutsu and Shibai's various powers, including his eye powers. Kashin Koji calls this power the 10 Directions, where he's able to see alternate timelines. Think of him like the Watchers from Marvel Comics, who can see what's going on, but also things that have yet to happen and the variant timelines when you get to a trigger point, which is basically a set point in the timeline that is reached and a different decision is made than what is supposed to happen, and it makes a new off branch of the timeline. In one of the timelines that Kashin Koji saw, Ishiki was able to kill Burial Mode Naruto, which isn't crazy given that when you take Naruto's penis out your mouth, Naruto's Burial Mode was wearing off in that fight as it went on, and Ishiki was choking out Naruto, and he eventually stomps him out the form. So the idea that Ishiki could kill Naruto wasn't crazy. In that manga panel, you see various timeline branches that are connected to various different moments, a fork in the road at that trigger point where one decision leads to a different outcome. In most of these, it led to Ishiki killing Naruto and planting the Karma Seal onto Kawaki. Ishiki resurrects in Kawaki's body, he feeds Boruto to the Ten Tails, and then he wins. It's a dark reality, but it is a cold truth. In Naruto's manga, so many things needed to happen just the right way in order to prevent Kaguya from being resurrected, which is why in around 65% of the Naruto with us on this channel, when you change something as small as the Uchiha clan deciding to leave with Madara instead of staying in Konoha, it leads to Kaguya's revival. But if you change something like Naruto learning Flying Raijin or getting the Rinnegan from Nagato or Minato never dying, the world ends with a better outcome than what we have currently. Kashin Koji further cements this by saying that in one timeline that he saw, one where Sarada never awakens from Mangekyo, it results in Boruto and Sarada being killed by Kawaki on the Hokage Rock, which given how that fight went down between Boruto and Sarada and Kawaki, that was believable, which that shocks Boruto when he hears it, because he knows how close he and Sarada came to dying when he got that scar in his eye. In another timeline, Omnipotence is never casted. Code, he beats the brakes off of Kawaki, which means Code gets his first victory off screen, and we have confirmation that Naruto was right, that Code still scaled over Kawaki at the end of part 1. Kashin Koji tells Boruto that once this happens, Boruto gets fed to the Ten Tails, and Code harvests a chakra fruit and it destroys the planet. Koji further tells Boruto they are walking a very tight rope, where the smallest change, it can result in the planet's destruction, which makes the words to Boruto in chapter 4 hit that much harder when Koji asks Boruto, were you trying to destroy the planet? Now, the reason you should be looking at Amado differently is this power of future sight. It should have been mentioned, even if he thought that Koji was dead, because it directly correlates to Ada's Senrigan. The Senrigan eye has two main powers. One is the ability to see into the past up to the moment of birth, and the other is to see everything going on in the present. Kashin Koji's power is to see the future. The three branches of time, the past, the present, and the future, they were available to Shibai's eyes. Now, two of Amado's cyborgs that have that power. As far as the naming of his power being the 10 Directions, we'll keep it brief, since by the time you guys have seen this video, I have a video breaking down what the 10 Directions are, but the concept of the 10 Directions continues to pinch in the Naruto franchise franchise to mix in Shintoism, Buddhism, Taoism, and Japanese folklore. The 10 directions are the 8 directions of the universe plus up and down, which is a representation of the existence of the Buddha that lands in every direction in every single universe, which has its own separate Buddha. This is why Koji is seeing all those different timelines for every trigger point, or if you're an MCU fan, this is what they would call a nexus event, a set point where you always get to it, but if things go a different way, it makes a new timeline. Each timeline that Koji sees is basically one of the 10 directions. Most of the timelines he sees results in that iconic game over meme of mission failed. We'll get next time. Back to Boruto. He's initially reluctant to believe all of this, saying it is unnatural, but even he, being as logical he is, as being as skeptical as he is, he can't dismiss the possibility of it being true, and he gets right to the point. How is him knowing all of this going to help him? And Koji answers us in a way that shows that for as much of a prodigy as Boruto is, he still needs a teacher because he hasn't still grasped the full truth of what it means to be a shinobi. True power, it isn't about how many mountains you can blow up, how many quintillion, septillion jutsu you can use. True power is knowledge. And Koji tells him this, saying that knowledge is the difference between living and dying, basically, which is why even for as weak as someone as Shikamaru is, he is still dangerous because knowledge and information in the hands of someone with prep time, it can be fatal. We get a pretty expressive scene that kind of overdoes it on comedy in a good way, where Boruto's drawn being super excited, trying to suppress his Naruto-esque mannerisms when Koji offers to teach him all of the ninjutsu and skill that he knows and the ones that Boruto will need in order to survive, while also making his training more streamlined and efficient. However, before Boruto can celebrate getting a new sensei and adding to his ninjutsu arsenal, Koji warns them that the path that they're embarking on, it is the worst possible future because it's one where Sasuke can be saved, but it results in the worst possible future for them. Hence, Koji tells Boruto, we're on a tightrope, one mistake, and we're all dead. In short, if Boruto chooses this path, which obviously he does, then Code will lose control of the Ten Tails, and the Shinju, they will awaken as they have now, and it will result in a large number of them who have their own will and their own desires, and they will be too dangerous to contend with. However, there is one certainty that they can take, one preventative measure they can use, which is to remove the source of the Ten Tails itself, and they can avoid this future, which is basically that black cube. But he tells Boruto the chances for success, they are slim here. That's why if you go back to when Boruto tried to reason with Code, he tells him this is the worst possible outcome if Code doesn't destroy the Ten Tails or take Boruto to where the Ten Tails is, because Boruto knew the future that awaited, and Jesus, this is dark. Jura is confirmed to not only be the leader of the Shinju, but he is also confirmed to be the one who kills Boruto on this timeline. We then transition back over to the current day, where Himawari, she's regained consciousness and she rushes over to Sarada to begin healing her wounds by using the Nine Tails chakra, which is crazy to think because she's got this level of control over Kurama's chakra already, and it's not relying on emotions. And as you expect, both Konoha and Kawaki, they don't understand what's going on, because neither of them know that she has Kurama, which that is a dramatic irony in effect. Before Himawari can heal Boruto, Kawaki stops her, and when Sarada challenges Kawaki, he says he's still going to allow Boruto to be healed, but only under certain precautions. He instructs Konoha to place a chakra suppressant handcuff onto Boruto that Amato made. While he does this, Kawaki picks up Kashin Koji's toad, and he recognizes it before Koji reverse summons it, and we see Kawaki keep that information to himself, and this, my friends, is where it starts to get yucky. Kawaki, prior to this, was already suspicious that someone was helping Boruto. Now Koji's toad has been spotted by him in Konoha, and with Boruto being taken to Shikamaru, the acting Hokage right now, he's going to have to play his next set of cards carefully if you're Kawaki, because the warning that Damon gave him, it is still in effect. Kawaki still is in danger of getting exposed, and things, they're starting to get outside of his control. Now, to be clear, what Damon said, it still applies. People are less inclined to believe Boruto or Sasuke because they are traitors to the village. Their emotions, they're going to be ruling them when it comes to Sasuke and Boruto. As we see when Sarada tries to tell Shikamaru and Konoha that Boruto's innocent in chapter 1. This, coupled with omnipotence, is making them look past things that should bother them. He's safe for the most part, but his risk does go up because of this one variable. Omnipotence, it has no bearing on if people believe Naruto's dead or not, simply because that is a lie that Kawaki tells in chapter 80, where he forces Ada to tell it by grabbing her by the neck and forcing her to tell Shikamaru that Naruto's killed by Boruto. Omnipotence was already casted, so this is a separate act. As long as Ada continues to tell that lie, saying she saw it with her Sharingan, nobody is likely to question it. But now you have Kawaki realizing that while they have Boruto in captivity, nobody can read Boruto's mind, otherwise they'll know Naruto's alive, and even though they'll think Kawaki's Naruto's son, that could open up more problems. Meanwhile, as Konoha is preparing to take Boruto in, and Kashin Koji's brooding over the situation, Jura has placed the Thorn Soul onto the cube, and as the branches of the tree move towards the Thorn Soul, it has Matsuri standing watch over the Thorn Soul as it begins getting reshaped, and we end the chapter with the remaining Shinju watching and waiting as the Thorn Soul is finished harvesting to produce a new awakened Shinju. And this, my friends, is very poetic because this is called the Shinju Awakening arc, and in a chapter where Boruto is asleep waiting to wake up, we have a Shinju who is in the process of awakening, quite literally being born. We open up the chapter with Boruto slowly regaining consciousness, and he's greeted by a familiar face in the form of Konohamaru, which under normal circumstances that would be fine given that Konohamaru was like a play uncle or a play big brother to Boruto for his childhood before he became his sensei. But now with Omnipotence changing the lives of Boruto and Kawaki, this familiar face is the face of someone who wants to see Boruto dead, and he's not alone. The torture specialist himself, Ibiki Morino, is in the room, and he's waiting for this opportunity to get his hands on Boruto. Upon realizing the dire situation he finds himself in, Boruto attempts to use the hand seal for the flying Raijin Jutsu, but Konohamaru tells him, hey fam, that's pointless. Those handcuffs, they won't allow Boruto to mold chakra, and they cannot be physically broken. Now, as the audience, this is information that we have, but it's dramatic irony in effect because we have to remember that Boruto doesn't know this due to the fact that in the last chapter, he was struggling to stay conscious when Konohamaru was telling him how the cuffs work as he was putting them on him, hence he's repeating the information. The inability to mold chakra not only prevents Boruto from using any type of ninjutsu, but it also prevents him from molding chakra, so he can't even use chakra to amp his physical strength to break free of the handcuffs. Any Shinjutsu that say he might know, he's in the same boat there. He can't use chakra. As he is right now, he's only got his God-given strength, and as Konohamaru tells him, if he tries anything, those cuffs, they are set to damage his arm. So in short, Boruto has been trapped. Upon seeing he's out of options, Boruto asks for an update on Himawari and his former classmates slash friends now turned enemies, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. Even being this deep into enemy territory and facing certain execution, Boruto is still concerned about the well-being of the very people who wanted to kill him due to the effects of Omnipotence, which is a sign that despite everything he's been through the last few years, the heart of that kind-hearted young boy that Naruto and Hinata raised is still there inside of him, proving every bit that he is indeed Naruto's child, since only Naruto and Hinata's child would find it in themselves to be thinking about others when they're in a situation like this. Konohamaru coldly moves forward with the interrogation, telling Boruto that while enemies might have retreated, he still wants answers as to why Sarada and Himawari and the Inoshikacho trio were all being hunted down. If it isn't obvious by now, Konohamaru's mind, in spite of seeing everything that he did from Boruto using the Rasengan and flying Raijin to his continued concern for his friends, his mind is still under the influence of Omnipotence, which as we'll see in a few moments, it is no knock on Konohamaru. It's more of a testament to how overpowered that ability is, which should make you applaud people like Amato and to a lesser degree Shikamaru and Sasuke, given that we now know how strong Omnipotence is and how hard they have to work to suppress the effects. Meanwhile, back inside of Konoha Hospital, Sakura, she has her work cut out for her by tending to Inojin's wounds, and while he has been physically healed by Himawari, he's not quite out the woods yet because he's still unconscious, and the reason he's unconscious is his chakra pathway system, it has been affected by Jura's attack, which those are the tenketsu that are in every part of your body, which allows chakra to flow to your organs, so things like your heart and your lungs, areas that Jura damaged when he attacked Inojin a few chapters back. While Himawari, using the Nine-Tails chakra, was able to heal him physically, she has a long way to go in terms of her healing, with Sakura needing to realign the proper flow to his chakra pathway system, which that is crazy, just given the level of skill needed for something like that. Konoha has always had some of the best medics in the ninja world. But in Naruto Part 1, when Neji nearly killed Hinata, it took her months in the manga timeline to recover. She wasn't back to 100% until after the events of the Sasuke retrieval mission and right before the end of that short 3-month mini time skip where Naruto finally left to go train with Jiraiya for the next 2.5 years. The fact that nobody, including the Hyuga clan back then, could fix her up, but Sakura can. It just speaks volumes to how far her medical ninjutsu has advanced. Watching all of this is going to be Ino, and for a moment, your heart, it really has to go out to Ino right here. It's been a rough 19 years for her. She lost her sensei 19 years ago to Hidana the Akatsuki. She lost her father to a Ten Tails Bijudama. Now she's almost lost her only child to a humanoid version of the Ten Tails. For her, this entire situation has her in a tricky spot. The decisions she makes to assist or not assist Shikamaru, they have real implications. She can't just make decisions based on how they affect her, but they also affect her child as well. And as we'll see, that plays a role in her thought process. Back in the interrogation room, things are heating up as the two elders and Amato watch Boruto's interrogation closely as Shikamaru presses him for answers on the most important questions regarding the Shinju and why they are targeting the people that they are. But as this is going on, we're in the process of Kawaki making his newest major big mistake since Boruto has arrived back on the scene. While he's sitting with Ada and Damon, with the former using her Shinrigan to tell them about Boruto's interrogation, Kawaki is suffering at the hands of Damon, who's being the little troll that he is. And he's taken the moment to push all of Kawaki's buttons. He's basically smiling at Kawaki and says, what are you going to do if Boruto snitches? If Boruto starts spilling tea, things can get pretty bad for you. And when he gets no response out of Kawaki, Damon just pushes the situation even further by both reminding Kawaki and us as the audience of something that tends to get overlooked by quite a few people in the fandom. So, omnipotence. Back when it was casted, it only swapped the memories that people had of Boruto and Kawaki. That is a fact. Undisputable. However, what is also an undisputable fact is that Kawaki's lie about Boruto killing Naruto and Hinata, it has no bearing on omnipotence. The reason being is that Kawaki told a lie about Boruto killing Naruto after omnipotence was casted, when he grabbed Ada by the shirt and made her tell the lie, speaking the unspoken threat to have her go along with his plan, otherwise she will suffer. And because of that, if Boruto were to tell people the truth, omnipotence won't save Kawaki here. They'll be able to comprehend that information without the effects of omnipotence directly pushing against it. This leads to Ada cutting in like she did in chapter 6 when Damon was pushing Kawaki on the same issue, because she knows her younger brother Damon very well. Damon is that kid who, when he knows that he's hit a sore spot on you, he's just going to keep pushing at it until he gets a reaction out of you. And so she tries to run interference here, but Kawaki finally gives in and he doubles down on his confidence by saying that none of this changes anything, and from a coldly logical perspective, he isn't wrong to take this stance. Sure, the lie about Naruto being killed by Boruto, it was done after the fact. But it does not change that due to omnipotence, everyone believes that he is Naruto's son and that it is not Boruto. So if it comes down to who you're going to believe, Kawaki or Boruto, if you're somebody in Konoha, you're going to believe the guy you think is Naruto's son, which would be Kawaki. It's cold and it's cruel and it's calculated, but given how far down this path that Kawaki is, it's his only choice here. He has to double down on this stance, which is why Damon is taking the enjoyment that he is. Kawaki then gives us another reminder as an audience, which is the fact that Kawaki still believes that Boruto is a threat due to the fact that Momoshiki can still hijack his body. It's for that reason Kawaki feels so confident, because he knows whenever the moment presents itself to him, Momoshiki is going to take control of Boruto's body for however long he can. And he's basically saying without saying, once that happens and Boruto shows that he is a monster, he's gonna kill the guy. And when that happens, he's more than content with dying. This, of course, goes back to Kawaki's last words to Naruto when he sealed him away, which is that he didn't expect Naruto to understand why he was doing what he's doing. But if after he kills Boruto and he unseals Naruto, if Naruto wants to kill him out of revenge, then he wouldn't fight back. And each time in Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, when Kawaki has spoken about going away, it's always been with this as the information he's referring to. He's content with dying for his sins when this is all over. And that leads to Ada having a worried look on her face because she knows exactly what Kawaki's saying, which is something that we have to keep our eyes on, because the last time she got desperate for Kawaki, it caused omnipotence to happen. So if there's a risk on this level, then you got to believe that Ada is going to be a wild card later on. However, this is also where he made his mistake. The whole time this is going on, Mitsuki appears, keyword appears, to have been listening in the entire time as he's looking out in the direction of the interrogation room. Though it's not shown right now, you have to believe he is replaying the words of Boruto that he spoke to them at the end of their battle about Boruto being Mitsuki's son and not Kawaki. As we'll see in a bit, there's evidence that supports this being the case. Meanwhile, Boruto has brought Konoha up to speed on how the awakened Shinju are created, which is by eating the people who are trapped in the trees, and he lays out the identities of those who have been bitten and their Shinju counterparts. And the look on Konohamaru's face when he says that Moegi is Matsuri and that she's after him, it is telling. He knows deep down in his soul that he's in hot water, and somewhere in ninja heaven, Asuma and Hiruzen, they're debating should they clear out a seat at their dinner table for Konohamaru. This leads to Amato weighing in and explaining why this new development is so dangerous and should not be underestimated, because in the past, the Ten Tails had operated solely off of pure instinct. Its primary mission was to seek out chakra after it ate Otsutsuki and to harvest the chakra fruit by destroying all life on the planet. And we saw that take place in Naruto's 4th Great Ninja War. Once the Ten Tails was ready to go, it quickly began seeking out all living things to begin its harvest. Yet, due to the fact that these Shinju are now operating off of logic instead of instinct, it makes them several times more dangerous because they're less predictable and they continue to grow as they gain new experiences. Boruto confirms Amato's words by saying not only is this the case, but Jura, the leader of the Ten Tails army, is the one who is the mastermind behind all of this, and Boruto confirms why Jura is as dangerous as he is. Unlike the others like Hidari, who was made from Sasuke's chakra, or Mamushi, who was made from Bug's chakra, or Matsuri, who was made from Moegi's chakra, Jura was not made from any human being. He is the Ten Tails itself. And now we see why Boruto was so desperate in chapter 4 to destroy the Ten Tails' main body before anything else. The reason being is that Jura, as he puts it, is on a whole different level than any of them can compete with. He is the source of their fear for human extinction. He is the apex predator. And Boruto wisely tells Konoha for this reason, they cannot afford to execute him. Boruto right now, he's trying to wisely use leverage to say that he is the only one who can defeat Jura, which means using 10 directions Kashin Koji has prepared Boruto for this monumental task, or he is in the process of doing so. Yet this move, it is smart, but it also backfires. Upon hearing Boruto's words, the two elders, both of whom they're in their 90s now, they narrow their eyes as Boruto refuses to name Kashin Koji as the one telling him this information, and Amato's troubled expression is enough for us to know he's already likely figured out his Koji, since he's the one who gave him Shibai's DNA. He would know about 10 directions. Boruto sticks to the cards he has, being every bit the sarcastic smartass that we know him to be, by saying he has all the information that they need, which is basically why they can't kill him, even if they think he's lying right now. Yet the two elders, they show us that archaic dinosaur mentality that existed back when the 3rd Hokage would go down in history as the Hokage and aggressor who started the 2nd and the 3rd Ninja War. They are war hawks. Even though the 3rd Hokage mellowed out in his old age, these two are every bit as still the same people who wanted to smoke as they were almost 100 years ago. They tell Boruto, you're in no position to bargain, and if he doesn't watch himself and answer accordingly, they're going to have Boruto suffer and make sure that he suffers as he dies, and that Boruto's not going to walk out that room alive no matter what information he has. They cut right to the chase and they tell Boruto, why did you kill Naruto? Answer the question. And this is where Boruto shows that he's a real one. He flat out says he didn't kill Naruto or Hinata. He says they're both alive and safe. However, he refuses to tell them what happened, how he knows that they're safe, and the context, which we as readers know. He's basically refusing to snitch on Kawaki. And the build up towards this, we see Shikamaru, and he's struggling heavily with the effects of omnipotence, and we see firsthand how much of a struggle it is for the people who are under the effects of that Shinjutsu. We saw glimpses of it in Boruto Naruto Next Generations Chapter 80, where Sasuke, even after seeing the scar on Boruto's eye and sensing Momoshiki's chakra, seeing his headband that should be in Kawaki's possession, and even hearing Ada explain to his face what happened, Sasuke was still struggling with omnipotence, saying things like he feels a force that's telling him to ignore all the problems he sees, and saying very cautiously at the end of the chapter, if you are truly Naruto's son, showing that he still had his doubts despite all of that. However, right here and now, we see exactly what Sasuke was struggling with through Shikamaru's perspective. So Shikamaru can't even think the words omnipotence under this context, and he is struggling to remember this conversation with Boruto and Boruto's words for him to trust him. Even after he plays back the words in his mind, struggling while doing so, omnipotence, it makes him forget it, and he has to forcibly make himself recall everything and believe Boruto's words, even as omnipotence is telling him to look past everything that Boruto told him about Kawaki using omnipotence. This just makes you look back at Sasuke, who watched over Boruto while he was asleep, and realized with a hand on his sword the thoughts that likely crossed Sasuke's mind, that this kid is not Naruto's son, and he has to forcibly fight off his memories that he had of hunting down Boruto with killing intent, which we know he was really hunting down Kawaki, and it's all because he chose to trust in his daughter. He didn't act on those impulses. For a whole year, every waking moment, Sasuke had to struggle with this. It hasn't even been a full day yet, and Shikamaru is already having trouble, which, my friends, is exactly why omnipotence, it is overpowered. As Boruto claims he didn't kill anyone, and Shikamaru refuses to allow Naruto's son to die here in this very moment, not like this. We see the wheels, they're getting put into motion by Shikamaru here. He's already using that big brain of his to come up with ways to get Boruto out the jam that he's in, all while the elders and Konoha and Ibiki begin ramping up the pressure of their interrogation, with Damon just stunned that Boruto didn't turn snitch, and Ibiki is getting ready to begin torturing Boruto. While all this is going on, Shikamaru, he's reaching out to Ino, and after he checks in on Inoji, he basically cuts to the chase and he says, hey, I need you to go ahead and link me up with Boruto. This leads to a very tense conversation where Ino flat out asks Shikamaru, are you ordering me as Hokage to do this? When Shikamaru says he's asking as a friend, but he reminds her this is a top secret mission, Ino's placed on the battlefield, it becomes clear she's not Team Boruto. She says everything that they're doing is flat out forbidden, and that Shikamaru has already crossed way too many lines, and she flat out states that she doesn't trust Boruto at all. She doesn't understand how Shikamaru can believe this story so easily. And if you go back to when she was listening to Boruto tell the story, she flat out calls it a wild theory. It's as Shikamaru is begging her as her friend, as her comrade, that we see what plays a role in her making her final decision. She's looking down at her son before she answers. She's not going to assist Shikamaru in something this risky, this dangerous, this illogical, where she's being told her memory's been tampered with, and she's not going to assist any further in something that could ruin her son's life. If she is wrong, she knows that her son could be punished by the shame that comes from his mother helping the killer of the 7th Hokage. As the head of the Yamanaka clan, she would bring shame upon her clan the same way Itachi brought shame upon the Uchiha by massacring it. The Yamanaka clan is the very clan her son will one day be the heir to and the leader of. And as we discussed in the Why You're Wrong About Restoring the Uchiha Clan video, family honor and clan honor, they are everything in Japanese culture. Ino promptly cuts off the communication with Shikamaru, leaving Boruto to get pummeled by Ibiki, who is slamming his face into the desk. And somewhere Kawaki has got to be feeling in the mud right now. That desk, it did more damage to Boruto than Kawaki's done in the last 14 chapters, unless you want to whip out the calculators and start power scaling and say that that desk clearly has durability levels that are 7 septillion times stronger than Kawaki. Whatever numbers you want to do, fam, that's all on y'all. However, none of Ibiki's threats, they're working on Boruto, who endures this whole thing. And when Ibiki says that he's waiting 3 years to punch Boruto in the face, we get this sarcastic line by Boruto that if this is what the last 3 years have been like for Ibiki, then the last 3 years must have really sucked to only be thinking about punching Boruto in the face. However, it's also a reflection of Boruto's mental state of mind as well. For him, the last 3 years, they haven't been all sunshine and rainbows for Ibiki, who had the equivalent of the first world problems that you and I have, where say we're watching something on TV and the internet is buffering when we're streaming, say Boruto's anime, or there are ads popping up on a YouTube video and we gotta hit 5 seconds to hit skip and go back to the video. Ibiki had the luxury of waiting 3 years, thinking of ways that he wanted to torture Boruto, which that is a first world problem compared to Boruto. 3 years ago, he was chased out of the only village he'd ever called home. Nobody remembered him as the second coming of the fourth Hokage, his grandfather. They viewed him as a traitor for killing Naruto and Hinata and for trying to kill their son Kawaki a second time. He was being hunted down by Anbu Black Ops across the entire ninja world. He was being hunted down by Code and his Ten Tails army. That same army, led by Code, eventually took down his master Sasuke. He spent the entire time aware of the extremely slim chances he had to stop Jura, knowing that if he failed, the entire world would be destroyed. For Boruto, when he says he envies Ibiki, this is what he truly means. Compared to what Boruto's gone through, Ibiki really hasn't gone through much of anything. As Ibiki continues to torture Boruto, Shikamaru calls for it to end, and he demands that Mitsuki be brought in to use poison. And this, my friends, is where Shikamaru has begun the break glass in case of emergency plan, now that Ino is refusing to help Shikamaru. Watching all of this is Ada with her Senrigan, and that side profile that she's drawn with makes it clear she's suspicious of what she's seeing, but she's letting the whole scene play out while she brings Kawaki up to speed. Meanwhile, as Mitsuki begins to enter the room, Shikamaru grabs his hand and reminds him that as shinobi, they can't afford to let their emotions get in the way. Our first sign that something is about to happen off screen, or rather it did happen off screen. Konohamaru warns Mitsuki he's got to be gentle with Boruto. He's got to treat Boruto the way that Diddy treated Meek Mill. If you know, you know, allegedly. Because Boruto has the information that they need, and as Mitsuki composes himself while looking at a bloodied and beaten Boruto, Boruto cracks that sarcastic smile of his and asks if Mitsuki is still looking for his son, and this appears to naked eye to set Mitsuki all the way off, because again, remember, a ninja must see through deception. He immediately powers up into Sage mode and he has his aura flaring up. He speed blitzes Boruto. He slams him into the wall. He's talking trash to him. Everyone thinks that Mitsuki's about to kill Boruto, which is exactly what he wants you to think, when in reality, he's using his snakes to enter the combination on the electronic keypad to release Boruto's handcuffs, and he tells Boruto where to find his equipment. This leads to Boruto quickly weaving the hand signs for the Flying Raijin, but not without telling everyone listening that he doesn't view them as enemies, and he will still provide them with information, but whether or not they use the information he gives, he's gonna leave that up to them. Basically, Boruto flexed and said, "You need me, I know you need me, I'm getting the hell out of here." In the blink of an eye, Boruto, he's recovered his sword, he's gotten his cloak back, which were marked by the Flying Raijin Jutsu ceiling marker, and he has quick words with the shinobi before he teleports out the room. It's then that we learn that Mitsuki has told Konohamaru this is all part of Shikamaru's orders, and the elders, they are not happy because this was their once-in-a-lifetime chance to kill Boruto, and they warned Shikamaru that the feudal lord of the Land of Fire, Madoka Ikkyo, who is Naruto's close friend and the father of Tento, the boy who Boruto saved back in the Mujina Bandits arc, the feudal lord of the Land of Fire, who pays all the bills that allows for Konoha to operate, he's not going to take too kindly to this new development of letting Naruto's killer escape, and it's going to result in Shikamaru being put on trial, Hokage or not. However, Shikamaru is unfazed by all of this, and he's back in the Hokage office sometime later. He's smoking in the Hokage office, and as Sarada storms in and begins asking questions about Boruto's interrogation and whereabouts, Shikamaru simply says he escaped, but before he can go into any further into detail, we get a bombshell. Kankuro has been patched through by Shikamaru by what appears to be Ino, despite him being all the way back in the Land of Wind, which is insane range for Ino's mind transmission jutsu, which she uses to speak to people. But Kankuro reveals that they were attacked in the Sand Village and that Gaara has been injured as a result, and Shinki being bitten by the claw grimes and turned into a tree. This, of course, transitions us over to the Ten Tails dimension as Kankro's asking Konoha for backup, likely acting as his sitting Kazekage, depending on Gaara's position and condition at this point in the story. And we see the Ten Tails version of Shinki, who's now named Ryu, being created and welcomed by Jura, Matsuri, Mamushi, and Hidari, which means their numbers have now grown. And unfortunately for Boruto, that means that there is one more Shinju for him to deal with. And the Shinju Awakening arc, it is now officially in its climax, and boy, is this next chapter something that is going to make you view Boruto's struggles moving forward a lot differently, as well as all the L's that Kawaki has taken. You're going to see it through a different lens now. So we open up with chapter 15 with a flashback showing the battle of Matsuri versus Gaara, which resulted in Shinki being turned into an awakened Shinju. And interestingly enough, the battle is occurring deep within one of Orochimaru's hideouts in the Land of Wind, evident by the snakeskin patterned columns that are in the hideout. And the reason for it is both Matsuri as well as the small team led by Gaara have been tracking Boruto's location, but they've been unsuccessful in finding his location due to Kashin Koji's advanced genjutsu hiding the entrance where they're at, because as a reminder, Orochimaru's hideouts, they are massive underground mazes and there are dozens of hidden passages, as we learned in the Tenchi Bridge arc of Naruto, which explains why Koji took the extra steps to hide himself in Boruto, and it's for good reason. While we don't know how close the Tsunagakari Shinobi and Matsuri got to where Kashin Koji was hiding, we do know the battle itself, it is very intense. Shinki and his other two adopted siblings are trapped inside of Gaara's sand cocoons, and they're begging to be allowed to fight alongside Gaara, to die alongside Gaara, because Gaara is refusing their help. But he's come to the same conclusion that Sasuke did in Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter 5, where he battled Code and his army of Ten Tails. Just as Sasuke told Boruto to flee because they can't win the fight, Gaara is saying a very similar thing to Shinki, Yodo, and Arya, and that we're seeing there's a continuation here of a theme from Naruto's manga, which is the whole concept of the king and how the younger generation doesn't grasp the importance of the king because it comes from the ignorance of youth itself. Just as Hiruzen and Asuma understood that the king isn't the Hokage or even the village itself, and Shikamaru in time grew to understand that as well, so much as the king is the next generation, it has to be nurtured. Sasuke also understood it for Boruto and Sarada and his actions in chapter 5, and right now in chapter 15, Gaara understands it with Shinki and his other two adopted children. Despite having such a serious wound directly to his stomach, Gaara is continuing to fight and uses chakra to protect the kids, and is intending to fight both Matsuri and still transport the kids to safety. And it's poetic when you realize this is the same guy from Naruto Part 1 who didn't care about people whether or not they lived or died. If he viewed them as being weak, they were expendable. Yet here he is protecting people that his younger self wouldn't have hesitated to kill because they're in his way. He would have thought only for himself, and when Matsuri tells him to do just that, think of himself and nothing else, and basically get out of her way as she searches for Boruto and his helper, Gaara, he refuses to back down because the lives of the children, they are what matters the most to him in this moment. This leads to Gaara using the last bits of his power to send off the kids flying, and he's fighting a 5 versus 1 battle, fully intending to fall. Matsuri and her 4 claw grinds against Gaara himself, but he's standing proud because he's strong, powered by the strength that comes only from someone who is a Kage, or in his case, a parent, and is willing to be the nourishment to allow the tree buds known as the next generation to blossom as a result of his pending death. However, things, they don't go exactly as Gaara had intended, so Shinki, in a last-ditch effort, uses his Magnum Release Kekkei Genkai to shatter Gaara's jutsu, and just when it appears as if Gaara is about to fall in battle, too injured and fatigued to continue fighting back, Shinki seals Gaara inside of a Magnum Release Sealing Jutsu. Right when he's about to be bitten, Gaara, he is obviously pissed off because Shinki is doing the exact opposite of what he ordered, not as an adopted father, but as a Kazekage. Yet Shinki's actions show that he's the same set of mindset that a young Asuma had when he left Konoha to join the Guardian Shinobi 12, and of the same mindset that Shikamaru had at the early portion of the Akatsuki suppression arc, which is they believe that the Kage is the one that matters the most, and so Shinki saves his father, believing that his village needs its Kage more than he needs his father. Yet his actions are what what leads him to getting eaten by one of the claw grimes and immediately turn into a tree, with his last words to Yodo and Arya being to flee and inform Kankuro, the acting Kazekage now, about what happened to Gaara himself. What's even more impressive is that Shinki, as he's telling his teammates their orders, he's still keeping his hands stretched out, using chakra so as to keep the Magna Release Sealing Jutsu active in order to protect his father, keeping it going even after he's fallen unconscious. This is even more impressive when you realize what's going on here, so allow me to explain even further. So he's acting in a similar fashion as Tsunade back during the pain arc. So remember when Nagato took all that chakra of all 6 paths of pain and he focused it all into the Deva path and he proceeded to blow up the village using 1 pain? Well, that was 6 people's chakra in 1 when he did it. So Tsunade not only took the damage of all 6 paths of pain combined, but she continued to send chakra to Katsuyu to protect the thousands of villagers still alive from the attack, and even after she fell unconscious, she subconsciously sent chakra to Katsuyu even in her mummified state, because Katsuyu is directly linked to the chakra of the summoner, which in this case is Tsunade. The moment Tsunade is out of chakra, Katsuyu goes bye-bye. Shinki, through sheer willpower, is continuing to maintain his sealing jutsu on Gaara, and it even impresses Matsuri when she inspects it, and she realizes that she can't break through it no matter how hard she tries, making note of Shinki's potential since he's able to maintain a will and maintaining the sealing jutsu, even though it won't come undone as long as Shinki is alive. The interesting thing here is that we are now down to 2 Kage who have been eliminated in the time since Ishiki first popped up on the scene. Naruto was sealed away by Kawaki, and now Gaara, he's been sealed away by Shinki. Just an interesting observation to keep your eyes on, because in the anime adaptation of Naruto Gaiden, the 7th Hokage in the Scarlet Spring, around episode 24-25, when Naruto tells the Kage about the threats that are stronger than Kaguya that are coming, the Kage, they all scoff at Naruto's assertion that the next generation will be ready to protect their world if the old generation is unable to do so, and we're now down to 3 of those 5 Kage that were in that room still remaining. We then transition away from the flashback and back to the current era, where Kankuro is continuing to beg Konoha for help, saying whatever intel they have, it will be useful in helping them rescue Gaara, and most importantly, help rescue Shinki. But the only thing Shikamaru can do is offer Kankuro a warning. If they detect chakra signature that matches Shinki's, then they need to realize it's not really Shinki, but instead it's an enemy, and to treat him accordingly. This is because Konoha just went through the same thing with Hidari, whose chakra signature was Sasuke's, and had it not been for Boruto, Hidari would have killed quite a few Konoha shinobi. After finishing up his conversation with Kankuro, Shikamaru returns his attention to Sarada and class rep, but this is where we see the brilliance of Shikamaru on display here. He's telling Sarada and class rep he's still going to talk to Boruto because they need information, but he's not really talking to them. He's talking to the toad in his office that is underneath his desk right at his feet. It is a direct message to Kashin Koji: get word to Boruto, we need to talk. At this point, if Boruto had already left the village and say he was with Kashin Koji, then he now knows return back to Konoha so they can speak, and he's being careful with his actions because he knows that Ada could be watching either right now or later on at some point with her Senrigan if she chooses to look back on the scene. Shikamaru pulled a 300 IQ move here. Meanwhile, Ryu is speaking with Jura, who is once again taking the leadership role, directing the Shinju along the path they should go, with Jura telling him the importance of having a name. But what should stand out here is that Ryu appears to be more intelligent than the other Shinju, who needed to be guided along the way, and their instincts were what were driving their immediate actions. Just as Jura came across as having a higher level of intelligence, we're getting signs of the same thing with Ryu, and we see really quickly how fast he can process information, because he quickly catches Code slipping by using his Iron Sand to rip Code out of the cube where he's been hiding using his claw mark jutsu, and Shinki is preparing to kill Code before Jura spares his life due to Code being the one who created them. But that's where the pleasantries basically start and stop. At this point, Jura is in control. So the last time we saw Code in chapter 4, he was telling Boruto he was content to sit there and allow the Shinju to do all the work for him, and he's been in hiding ever since, and we now know where he's been. He's been watching everything via the claw marks in the hideout, and the conversation between Jura and Code, it heats up immediately and intensely. You got Code, he's getting pissed off, and Jura says that finding an Otsutsuki, namely Boruto Kawaki, it isn't really high at the top of his to-do list, and that there are other matters he wants to attend to before going down that path, and even implies that the desires to consume the chakra fruit itself is something Jura Jura wants, and that sets Code off. This goes back to Boruto's warning to Code in chapter 2, where he tells him, destroy the Ten Tails now while you can still annihilate them, because they're going to get too powerful for you to control. Up until now, the Ten Tails, it simply sought out Otsutsuki to eat. It went by nature itself. Yet Jura, as the Ten Tails itself in human form, he has shown a startling amount of growth. He has his own desires and his own thirst for knowledge and experiences. He's gaining new sensations. He's now questioning indirectly to Code's face if his purpose is to merely be used to harvest a chakra fruit, and why can't Jura be the one who consumes it himself, which is as big of an alarm bell as you can ring right now with this character, because it signals growth in a direction that now makes Kashin Koji and Boruto's warning about Jura make a lot more sense. He is bad news in a major way because he cannot be contained, he cannot be controlled, even by the person who is responsible for making him. Jura further elaborates, telling Code he's free to go after Boruto and kill him. He has his permission, but Kawaki's the one that Jura's interested in eating. It both sets Code off, as well as give us as readers insight into how advanced Jura's mind is. As we all know, Jura loves to read, and Jura is basically doing what you see in the 48 Laws of Power. He's already identified Boruto as being a threat, but he sees Code as a means to an end. While he has other passions that he wants to pursue before harvesting a chakra fruit, he's trying to use Code to do the work for him and kill Boruto, taking advantage of Code's already built-in hatred for Boruto as it is. Even though Code realizes what it is that Jura's doing, he makes it clear and he focuses on the fact his priority is eating the chakra fruit and eating it to fulfill Ishiki's will. But we as readers, we should be seeing how fascinating this is, because Code is unknowingly proving what Matsuri said to him in chapter 4 to be absolutely correct. So Matsuri basically called Code a literal clown, saying that it was his destiny to be used by others, and that's exactly what's happening here. Ishiki was using him to fulfill his own desires to harvest a chakra fruit. It wasn't something that Code just woke up one morning and said, I want to do this. He was being guided by that purpose by a guy that he worshipped. Now Jura is using him as a means to an end to eliminate Boruto, and the person who's eliminating Boruto, who we know is Kashin Koji. The issue is that Code realizes this is going on, yet at the same time he doesn't really realize what's going on because he's so blinded by pride, and that makes what happens next so heartbreaking only if you're a Code fan. So Code, he cuts on his Karma Seal to prepare for battle against Jura, and he drives his arm into the claw mark because at this point it's his intention to subdue Jura by force. However, we see exactly what both Boruto and Ada meant in the past. When Boruto told Code, hey, you're not going to be able to annihilate these Shinju once they awaken unless you help me kill them now. And what Ada meant when she told Kawaki, don't underestimate these Shinju because they are, quote, monsters and in a different league than Code. So those were not exaggerations. Within moments, Jura shoots a Biju Dama out his Rinnegan that destroys Code's arm and forces him to place a claw mark over it to serve as a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. To add insult to injury, Jura basically big bros Code by saying he's going to give his pathetic life meaning by now allowing Code to hunt down Boruto and whoever it is that is helping Boruto and kill them. The deal that they make is that Jura will give Code the chakra fruit while Code panics and he snarls, and as this is going on, Mamushi, who was made from Bug's chakra, he's laughing at Code, taking joy out of seeing the person who once bullied and threatened him in the past being pushed to his breaking point here, which is very fitting when you look at what Mamushi's name means. So Bug was a pun on computer bug, just as all the car inners, they all had names that had tech puns to them, but he was also a pun on just bugs in general. Bugs scurry away. Mamushi is the name of the most venomous snake in Japan and the most dangerous viper in Japan. Just as the viper sits there silently waiting for its target, Bug was watching as well as taking joy in Code's suffering. Even though Code tries to maintain some level of pride and assertion of control by vowing that he'll be the one that laughs in the end, he is once again running off with his tail between his legs, doing the bidding of another person, and likely knowing that Jura has no intention of giving him the chakra fruit. This whole exchange by Jura and Code, it can be boiled down to a show of force to assert dominance over somebody you're in a conversation with, and Jura basically pulled that off here. This entire exchange basically boils down to Jura is basically the pimp and Code is the hooker who goes out there, makes some money for him, and then Jura says, give me the money. Substitute money with Boruto being the person that Jura wants, and that's basically Code's role. He is basically Jura's doll. He then learned not only does Ryu want to kill Code, which Jura doesn't even object to. He views Code as expendable, but Ryu's target is also Gaara, who is currently sealed away, which makes it all the more likely we're heading towards another rumble in the Land of Wind, which means Kashin Koji better be packing up that U-Haul to get his and Boruto stuff ready to move before Code and Ryu pull up looking for them. Meanwhile, Boruto sitting at the Hokage monument between the central business district that is behind the monument in the background, and he's overlooking the old Konoha where Naruto grew up and where the Hokage office is and the Ninja Academy is located. He's sitting at his father's Hokage monument head, and there are two very poetic things that are going on here. One is foreshadowing and the other one's just poetic. So the first is that Boruto sitting at his father's monument's head, the same way that we learned in Naruto Retsunden, the 7th Hokage and the Spiral of Destiny, a side story we've covered here on the channel in the Naruto novel section playlist. But Naruto in that story would often go to Minato's Hokage head to look down over the village while sitting on top of the head and think about whatever it was he needed to think about to clear his mind. This is a clear nod of like father like son, which is very poetic, but it's also foreshadowing and it's very intentional. So Boruto and Kawaki are each in the positions they're in during their final battle and the flash forward sequence that occurs at chapter 1 of Boruto Naruto Next Generation. So Boruto isn't on one knee like in the flash forward sequence. Instead, he's sitting down and Kawaki is the one standing up further up the Hokage monument. It's a great way to be a tone setter for what's about to unfold, because this conversation, it gets very deep and it changes the way you view Boruto's character. So Boruto asks Kawaki, hey man, are you alone? Knowing full well that even if Kawaki says yes, the answer is really no, since Ada's watching the whole thing with her Sharingan. And so Kawaki cuts right to the chase, asking Boruto, why didn't you snitch on me? And the answer we get from Boruto is a further sign of his maturation. He tells Kawaki that telling the truth, that Kawaki framed Boruto for the murder of his parents who are really sealed away by Kawaki, won't do anything except cause a civil war basically. Some people will believe Boruto like Shikamaru did, and others will be like Ino and refuse to believe their memories have been altered. They'll just do more harm than good, which is why it's better to allow people to stay ignorant to the truth. Similar to how Kakashi, upon learning about the Uchiha massacre, also came to the same conclusion, that revealing this information, it would just make the state of affairs with the village even worse. It's a dark commentary on human psychology, but it's one I would argue is correct. So people, they deserve to know the truth, absolutely. But when you tell the truth, it matters just as much as the truth itself. So something like this is better revealed potentially after the fact, if it ever gets revealed at all. Because you have series like Ocean no Code, they dabble in that concept. Sometimes lies, they are a form of love. To protect someone from truth, you're lying to them out of mercy. We don't fully know where Boruto is on that stance, but what we do know is that he has the maturity and the wisdom to know that if he goes about this whole situation wrong, it makes everything blow up. And as he told Shikamaru, in order to unseal his father, Kawaki, he can't feel pressure. He has to do everything willingly. So Boruto even credits his mentor Sasuke with being able to come to this very mature conclusion. He's basically willing to be the vessel for the hatred of the village if it means being able to see the village function as it should. They're chasing Boruto, the rogue ninja, the Kage killer, and it's heartbreaking when you think about it. He is forced to flee the only place he's ever called home, but he's doing it in order to protect it and to protect the same brother who wants to kill him. But as we'll see in a moment, the Boruto and Kawaki relationship, it is still a very complicated one. Boruto tells Kawaki that he's right in his belief that Boruto can't control karma, and it's because he's still afraid of it, and we learn why it is, and this is so sad. So 2 years ago, during the Boruto versus Code battle where Sasuke was struck down, there was a moment where Boruto's karma, it cut on for the first time, and he felt Momoshiki beginning to take over his body, and it scared Boruto because he could feel what was happening, and he was conscious of it the entire time. From that moment onward, Boruto has not used karma again because he can't control it. He is afraid of it, but he's basically losing sleep at night knowing that deep inside of him, Momoshiki still exists. And this is important to keep in mind for two reasons. So number one, at the end of Boruto Naruto Next Generations, a lot of people, they confuse Momoshiki bringing Boruto back to life to mean that he can't hijack Boruto's body, when that is not true. He can. He just cannot resurrect in his old form. Think of Momoshiki as he fought Naruto and Sasuke. He can never go back to that, but he can hijack Boruto's body in the form of what fans call Borushiki. That is still possible. Number 2, Boruto and Momoshiki's thoughts and their consciousness, they were beginning to merge with each other at the end of Boruto Part 1. And even so, with him suppressing Momoshiki, that demon is still deep inside of him, and it troubles Boruto to his core. Kawaki says the quiet part out loud, that things have gotten even worse from where they were 3 years ago. And Boruto, he quickly shifts the focus to Jura, telling Kawaki that if they're gonna survive what is coming, they need to team up, which that is correct. It's something that Kawaki knows is correct, but he doesn't let Boruto strawman his way away from the topic of their conversation a moment ago, the most important topic of conversation, talking about Boruto's Momoshiki problem. And this is where Boruto yet again places an impossible burden on Kawaki by saying, if at any point after we defeat the Shinju, if Momoshiki takes over my body, I want you to kill me, showing that despite everything, Boruto still trusts Kawaki to do right by him. And Boruto himself knows something that fans to this day still refuse to accept, which is that Kawaki, he is right. Boruto is a threat. He is a threat to humanity. He is a threat to Kawaki himself, but he is also admitting that as things are right now, he has no way to control Momoshiki fully. And so this option, it is still on the table as long as Momoshiki is still a problem. Despite everything that Boruto's gone through for the last 3 years, he's still only a 15-year-old child. He's still got that same 12-year-old kid deep inside of him who once told his master before the Ishiki battle that he was scared of the alien inside of him and potentially harming people, basically begging his sensei to kill him before it ever came to that. And now Boruto's asking Kawaki, save me of that fate if it ever gets to that point, but only until after we eliminate Jura. This leads to Boruto telling Kawaki that as Naruto's student, he expected Kawaki to be stronger, but as he is now, he's too weak. And the thing that is holding back Kawaki is Amato. And somewhere that sussy Baka power level for Amato, it just went Super Saiyan because Boruto just put this man's business out there. Boruto tells him that Amato has been affecting Kawaki's true power because of his own selfish reasons. He wants to use Kawaki, and the whole time this is going on, Amato is watching through Kawaki's eyes because Kawaki is a cyborg that Amato created. Let's do quick clarification here since we still have people who confuse androids and cyborgs. So we'll put this as simple as possible. An android would be Vision or Ultron from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They are robotic beings with human features, but they themselves, they are not human. They were never born as humans. Cyborgs are what we have in Boruto. Cyborgs are naturally born humans like Kawaki and all the car enters from Code to Delta to Kashin Koji to Ada to Damon. Cyborgs are human beings who have had their bodies mechanically enhanced. Kawaki's entire body is a scientific ninja tool, as is every single car and a member, including Kashin Koji, who is a clone of Jiraiya, and Delta, who is one of the 4 remodeled clones of Amato's daughter, Akubi. Think of them like 17 and 18 from Dragon Ball. They are still human beings because cyborgs are humans, which is why 17 and 18 could still start families. Now, as you would expect, Amato is not pleased by Boruto explaining all this, and he quickly pieces together the truth, which is that Kashin Koji is alive, and Amato has now realized he's made a miscalculation. He assumed that Kashin Koji was dead because the Ishiki battle, it was a suicide mission. Kashin Koji was not supposed to live, yet Kashin Koji is the only person who could have given Boruto the information, and now Amato's mind, it is racing. There's a problem. He needs a solution. Boruto is spilling tea, and he's making it known he knows most of what we do as the audience. Not everything, but he knows most of it. That when Amato restored Kawaki's Karma Seal, he messed with Kawaki's power level, likely to his own benefit. However, what Boruto doesn't know is that Amato placed a control option inside of Kawaki to shut him down if it ever came to it. Boruto tells Kawaki that if he doubts him, then go ahead and confront Amato yourself. Kawaki then tells Boruto that nothing's changed when it comes to his plan. For the sake of Naruto, for the sake of the world, for the sake of himself, all of Sasuke, they need to be destroyed. And all abnormalities like the awakened Shinju, they need to be destroyed as well. They're all connected, and he reminds Boruto. That means Boruto's life as well, because he also means himself. Everyone's got to die. For now, they've agreed to a truce, but it won't be long-lived. And once they defeat the common enemy, it's back to green light season on Boruto. And by the time they reach that point, Kawaki Kawaki vows he's gonna be strong enough to kill Boruto, conceding right now he's currently weaker than him, and Boruto merely smiles in response, basically saying he expected nothing less of Kawaki. And so we end off the chapter with the two brothers setting aside their differences to tackle the larger threat in Jura, and with the battle that large that is looming, it means that the stakes they're being raised. Obviously, that's gonna be it for the Shinju Awakening arc, but if you want to go back and catch everything before this, click here on the left for that Boruto full story playlist, or click here on the right to get caught up with the latest Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter reviews. You want to start at chapter 16 after you finish this video.